Okay, welcome to the Francis Howell School District Board of Education meeting. We moved this meeting to the virtual format due to the hazardous road conditions in our area. In compliance with Missouri Sunshine Law notice requirements, we did provide 24 hours notice of the change in location from in-person to virtual. The purpose of this meeting is to celebrate our successes and showcase our talented students and staff, as well as to conduct the business of our district, hear reports about progress on key initiatives, and hear from the community on important issues. We appreciate the time you took to attend tonight's virtual school board meeting. We will now open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Board, I would like a motion to approve the agenda for February 17th, 2022 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, raise your right hand and say nay. Motion carries. I will now turn it over to Miss Jen Joles.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. The Missouri Department of Secondary and Elementary Education has proclaimed this week, February 13th through 19th, as School Board Recognition Week. We would like to take a moment to recognize the many contributions our elected school board members make. They give so freely of their time and talent in a purely volunteer capacity. And I know this recognition is probably making you uncomfortable, but we ask that you bear with us. These last 2 years, dominated by the COVID pandemic, have been a testament to not only our students' ability to adapt and overcome, but also to our school board members who work diligently behind the scenes to make the educational experience the very best it can be for our students in a time where normalcy isn't always accessible. They are extraordinary people who voluntarily tackle the enormous job of governing our great school district and do so in a manner that puts the best interests of students and staff above all else. And so on behalf of the entire Francis Howell community, I want to say thank you, Board of Education, for your leadership and commitment to our students, staff, and communities. We appreciate your efforts in leading us into the future. Thank you for all of your dedication and hard work for our school district. We appreciate all the time you spend serving on our board. And now we have a short video tribute to share with you. And so I'll ask Dr. Wilson to pull that up and let's get it playing. Thanks, Rich.
I would like to recognize the Board of Education for making extremely difficult decisions.
I'd like to recognize them for volunteering their time.
I would like to recognize them for their tireless effort.
We're all living in a bunch of unknown, and they are trying to make decisions for an entire district.
The last 2 years have been different because there's been just a large number of really high impact stressful topics that have come in front of the board, and they've really had to adapt how they approach things.
They've shown a lot of flexibility and a lot of strength in making quick decisions with the information that they have.
They've had to call emergency board meetings, make decisions about masks, in-person events.
And they've had to change those decisions a lot throughout this year and just deal with a lot of community support and pushback to that.
Any decision they make makes about 50% of the people happy and 50% unhappy. And I know I've been on both sides of that.
There's been a lot more attention on all of the decisions that are being made, and that has really put our board members in a spotlight that's different than what they're used to in the past.
I really appreciate that they're doing the best they can with what's been dealt to us and around us.
They have stood strong and continue to be positive and continue to keep their focus on the learning.
The usual business of the school district takes a lot of time.
The last 2 years, it has been probably what could be a full-time job for them, and they don't get paid anything.
These men and women have to give a lot of their own time and they do it because they're here for our students.
I think they have the community and the school's best interest.
Our Board of Education does a really nice job of just advocating for a high quality public education.
I'm sure they have a very thankless job, and we're just happy that they're here supporting all of us.
I want to thank them for the time they've put in and all the difficult decisions they've had to make.
Thank you, Board, for your friendship, your guidance, and the care that you provide to our staff and students.
Thank you, Board, for your dedication, for your unpaid hours.
Thank you, Board, for all of your efforts to do what's best for our kids.
Thank you, Board, for all that you do.
Our school board is incredible, and each of you are the reason. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you, Board.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
Thank you, Board.
Thank you, Board.
We appreciate you.
Thank you, Board.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
Thank you, school board. Thank you, school board.
That was great. Thank you. Next up, we will have Mr. Rich Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Lang. Good evening and happy School Board Appreciation Week. So one of the initiatives that came out of the district strategic plan was to implement a common learning management system district-wide across the district, grades K through 12. Canvas was adopted as the district's learning management system to provide a consistent digital platform for all of our teachers, students, and families. Having a common system allows for consistencies and efficiencies with professional development, implementation, resources, and support. The Canvas rollout is a multi-year implementation plan. Canvas was implemented last year at the secondary level, and the plan is to roll it out at the elementary school level next school year. And with the Canvas rollout at the elementary school level next year, we will have around 80 of our elementary teachers who will be trained as Canvas ambassadors. And also during that time, next school year and going forward, of course, we will continue to provide support and additional resources for all of our teachers, grades K through 12. A special shout out that I want to do to our two district instructional technology content leaders, April Burton and Dr. Meredith Bates. They have been instrumental with the Canvas rollout and working with our teachers. And April Burton has created a short video that highlights a few of our teachers who talk about what they have been using Canvas for with their teaching and learning. So let me pull that up. Implementing a district-wide learning management system is part of the district's strategic plan. The need was identified across multiple strategic goal areas. In December 2019, the Board of Education approved the LMS Committee's recommendation to adopt Canvas across the district. Canvas was rolled out at the secondary level in school year 2021. And the plan is to roll out Canvas at the elementary level next school year in school year 2023. Having a standardized system across all grade levels K through 12 offers a common platform for all of our K-12 teachers, students, and families. Canvas provides a robust digital platform used with in-person, hybrid, synchronous, and asynchronous teaching and learning. Canvas provides opportunities for online classroom discussions, assignments, curriculum and content management, learning modules, and assessments. And with Canvas, we can further enhance our students' future-ready skills.
Canvas has helped me to build a community of learners. We've had to learn how to use Canvas together, and then we've also able to use Canvas to meet our individual academic needs. So the kids know they're all learning different things and at different places, but it's allowed me to be able to share resources with them so they can all work on what they need to work on.
Last year and the year before, I was using Google Classroom. Loved Google Classroom. Canvas is a step up from Google Classroom, and just the putting in the things that I use with my kids is so much easier for me and for the students. They're able to like zip to an assignment. I can do asynchronous learning as well as just supplementing my daily learning with the students.
It does keep them a lot more organized. You know, organization in middle school has always been a struggle, and so when they had a planner to keep and a folder to keep and all of that, like, they're not frustrated from losing things.
So Canvas in the classroom for me has been a big help in organizing everything for units. Since I teach everything from kindergarten as a specials teacher, from kindergarten to 5th grade, it's really helped me to organize all my units because it's really a lot to think of. And so for me, if I'm able to construct over time, and that's what I'm doing this year, is constructing for the future, all these units that are very organized with all my material, and I can go through them throughout the year, that's a lot easier for me. And the best thing about it is I'm going to take all this information and it's all going to be organized for next year, and it's going to reduce my workload.
So Canvas has allowed me to personalize learning because I can set up a unit or a module all at one time. The module might include instructional videos, links to websites for the kids to practice on, and they can work through it at their own pace, or they can rewatch a video if they need to get the information more than once. It also syncs with Mastery Connect, so it's easy for me to assess the students' learning.
So I have used some of the features where you can assign different assignments to kids, and so when they're in Canvas, if it's turned on for them, when they hit next, the next thing is their assignment. They may not even know they're getting a different assignment than someone else. I also think that, you know, through discussions and being able to use peer feedback and all of that kind of stuff, I'm able to differentiate things and give them different options, so they don't all have to read the same article, because I can put a link of a PDF. They can pick the one they want to read and then, you know, make those kinds of choices. So I've been able to increase the interest and the engagement, but also then sometimes tailor things because they're getting something different than someone else because that's what they need.
Biggest piece on helping parents to connect with the classroom is getting them to sign on so that they can see as a parent observer, so they can look at their child's work, they can see the scores, they can see what's been turned in, what has not been turned in. I always state that the little dash mark is a minus sign and it's bad. The page icon means it's turned in, it's not graded yet. Once they learn to navigate, it's been a pretty powerful tool for the parents to be able to go in and really watch and be able to support their child more at home and say, hey, I've noticed that this isn't turned in yet. It was due on this date. We need to get this turned in.
So the parents that have connected with Canvas can sign in at any time. They can look at our calendar and see what's coming, what special events there are. They also can see our learning objectives and any assignments we're working on. They have learned how to get on Mastery Connect through Canvas and check their students' scores on things. And if they're trying to help their child at home, they can watch the same instructional videos that are available for the kids so that the kids hear the same thing at home too.
Any students who want to continue with the material in class can access my modules, and within the modules I can put extra material that can keep them motivated outside of class. And so a teacher says, I really want to, for example, ukulele, they really want to go ahead of where the class is and get some extra material. I can put that in extra section for them, and they can immediately get to it outside of class.
I love how they can get to their math assignments straight through Canvas. It imports from Savvis Pearson, and the kids love that. They love that it's right there for them, and it also will put their grade into Canvas when they do a quick check. Our kids are very tech savvy, and they like having that opportunity, that empowerment of taking some of their learning in for themselves.
We just use it every day, so they're used to it as part of their routine, and they know where to find stuff and what to do. So hopefully that helps.
All right, thank you, board. Just wanted to take a few minutes this evening to update you about where we're at with the Canvas implementation. You heard from our teachers how it's going, and just want to ask if you had any comments or questions at this time. Thank you.
Any comments or questions, board? Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Next up, we will have our patron comment. During patron comments, citizens are invited to address the Board of Education concerning issues related to the school district. For tonight's virtual board meeting, patrons were asked to submit comments to be read aloud by a staff member during the patron comments portion of our meeting. All of the same protocols that apply to in-person patron comments applies to those read in virtual format. Each comment will be limited to 3 minutes. Comments submitted by 4 p.m. today will be read aloud by our directors of communications in the order of sign up until we reach the 30-minute time limit. For your convenience, our 3-minute time clock is ready. And Miss Joels.
Thank you, Miss Lang. And since these aren't my words, I'm going to leave my camera off so you can focus on the words that I'm saying. Jane, just confirming you're ready with the timer. Good to go? Okay. Our first comment is from Tom Ferry. Good evening. As a district parent, I have a lot of gratitude to extend to our staff members. First, I want to thank the board for the option to have comments read out loud, allowing parents with conflicts to have our voices heard. Please make this a permanent policy going forward. I also want to thank the board for their service to the district and community. It's incredibly difficult to bear the brunt of the issues, some local, some national, many completely baseless. I want to thank our bus drivers for safely transporting our kids. I want to thank our nurses for keeping our kids in schools healthy. I want to thank our custodians and facilities teams for providing a clean and safe learning environment, especially in the older schools. I bet they look forward to a brand new high school, as I do. I want to thank our counselors for fostering emotional connections with kids so they feel safe working through their personal concerns. I want to thank our paraprofessionals for doing the incredibly difficult jobs that would otherwise be picked up by teachers despite the low pay, something the community must rectify. I want to thank our district specialists for working with children with specific needs. I want to thank our lunchtime staff for efficiently preparing and serving hundreds of meals per day. I want to thank our school and district administrators. Despite having a student to admin ratio that's well above the state average, meaning we have way fewer administrators, our admin teams do their utmost to serve teachers, staff, students, and the community, an impossible task to please everyone. I want to thank our librarians for their uncanny ability to pick out the right book for the right student at the right time, despite ridiculous demands to ban books and deliberate attempts to circumvent library processes. Thank you to community members who support the district and strive to move us forward, not backwards. Lastly, I want to thank our teachers. Thank you for your perseverance over the last 2 years. Thank you for all the unpaid work you do, but shouldn't have to. We owe you for that. Thank you for taking on the extra stress due to staffing shortages, including those caused by COVID. Thank you for weathering the attacks on your profession with dignity and grace, including baseless and false claims of teaching graduate level courses to high school students. Thank you for always providing the accountability and transparency that parents and lawmakers are now demanding. Thank you for the engaging and impactful lessons you provide our kids. Thank you for the profound and lasting connections you make with students, making them feel valued and included. It means more than you can ever know. Thank you for all making Francis Howell one of the top districts in the state. That's the end of that comment. And Jane, I'll ask that you cut me off if I get to 3 minutes. The next comment is from Jennifer Main. I am a Francis Howell parent and I am grateful. I am grateful for the vacation station staff members who greet my sleepy children when I drop them off in the morning on my way to work. They treat my kids like their own. I am grateful for the nurses who apply ice and Band-Aids when parents cannot. I am grateful for the paraprofessionals who provide extra guidance and attention for the students who need it. I am grateful for the support staff members who serve lunches, clean buildings, and do other behind-the-scenes work to help schools run smoothly. I am grateful for bus drivers who transport students safely and with care. I am grateful for building administrators who strive to ensure the day runs smoothly for everyone and often wear many hats. I am grateful for school board members who work to balance the needs of many different stakeholders in the district, but ultimately know the most important of these is the students. Most of all, I am grateful for our teachers who work long hours and take care of student needs from their own pockets. I am grateful for teachers who inspire questions, creativity, and a love of learning. I am grateful for teachers who look for the spark in each child, create second families in their classrooms, and then watch with pride as those students move on the next year. I am a Francis Howell parent, and I am grateful. That's the end of that one. Next speaker is Randy Cook. Good evening. My comments this evening were going to be about two of the purchases over $7,500 that are on tonight's agenda, but as you are all aware, I emailed my concerns to you earlier today. Again, I urge you to vote against approving items number 1 and number 16 in the purchases over $7,500. What follows is something from a parent that is near the end of the patron comments list of over 20 people. I felt these comments warranted being read aloud and not buried in board docs. The patron who submitted these comments is a parent with children in the district. Their comments are as follows. Presently, there are few policies governing the interactions between principals or administrators and students. I think we should implement or amend policy so that all parties involved in matters of abuse, bullying, or discipline are better protected and parental involvement is improved. Ideas for expanding our policies include: if a principal or an administrator needs to speak with a student regarding an issue of abuse, bullying, which could be physical, emotional, verbal, sexual, and cyberbullying would all fall under the categories of abuse or bullying, or discipline, they will contact the appropriate teacher depending upon the age of the student and set up a time to meet. The meeting should never take place in a hallway or a space with other students. They should meet in an office or a quiet area where the student feels safe. Number 2, if a principal or administrator needs to speak with a student regarding an issue of abuse, bullying, or discipline, they will not meet with the child alone. Such meetings should take place with a counselor or a teacher that the student feels safe talking to. Number 3, if there is police involvement and an officer needs to interview a student related to a school issue, a parent will be contacted before the meeting takes place and given the option to attend the meeting. Number 4, if a principal or administrator needs to speak with a student regarding an issue of abuse, bullying, or discipline, the student's parent or guardian will be contacted and invited to attend said meeting either in person or via telephone/video conference, and be regularly informed about steps that are being taken to remedy the situation. These steps are recommended for all students, regardless of which side of an abuse, bullying, or discipline situation they find themselves in. I believe this allows for teachers to implement routine discipline for typical behavior as they do now, but would improve processes around more serious matters. Thank you for your consideration. Next speaker is Amanda Urich. Good evening, and thank you for affording me the time to speak with you tonight. I am a parent of a Francis House School District Early Childhood Center student. I wanted to address my family's appreciation and thankfulness for the Francis Howell educators in our child's life. These educators range from my child's teacher and paraprofessional who lovingly engage with and guide her each day she is at school, to her speech therapist who has done absolute wonders in facilitating my child's speech development, and finally to our amazing parent as teacher liaison who has enabled us to understand developmental milestones our children should be reaching. Each of these educators has provided an environment to enrich and guide our child. My family and I could not ask for a better learning environment for our child, and we are forever grateful that this initial school experience has been utterly amazing despite the conflict occurring around us. Each day that I drop off or pick up my child at school, I am astonished at the energy, the enthusiasm, and the compassion that these educators exude. My child's teacher and paraprofessional have provided an enriched environment that permits her to play, to learn, and to engage with those around her. We have observed that since beginning school, she has become so much more confident in her writing, her artistic endeavors, and her play. Each day that I pick her up, she does not want to leave school. She has such a wonderful time and yearns until the next day she attends. I am so thankful that her educators have provided a positive learning environment for her so that she may develop a lifelong desire to educate herself. Teaching a classroom of children, especially 3 to 5-year-olds, takes a very special person, and I am in absolute awe. These educators deserve thankfulness and praise from the school district, the community, the parents, and the students they teach. The past few years have been exceedingly daunting, and I commend the resourcefulness and resilience of our educators. My husband and I are large supporters of public school systems and the diverse educational experiences they afford. We are both products of public schooling, each of us holding doctoral level degrees. I was not afforded many of the opportunities my children have in Francis Howell due to my school district's location, size, and economic capabilities. When we moved to Francis Howell, I was excited to envision my children growing up in a district akin to one that many of my college and professional peers attended. Difficult and tumultuous times are ahead of us regarding public schools and their capacity to educate our children. Our district has some very challenging financial decisions in the coming months, but I implore you to please not forget about funding educators both in the classroom and out. The Parent as Teacher program has been instrumental in understanding developmentally where our children should be. Our PAT liaison was the initial person to discover our child had a speech delay. It was through her knowledge and guidance that we were able to get our child evaluated and placed in speech therapy, where she has made vast improvements. We are so thankful that Francis House School District provides this program to aid in enriching the young children of our district, and I implore you to please keep it in mind when discussions arise about appropriation of funds. By providing resources and education for the youngest children in our district, we allow them to be better and more adequately prepared to begin school. Thank you for your time. The next speaker is Marissa Polzin. Good evening. I wanted to take this opportunity to show my gratitude for our teachers and staff who are amazing. I've always been in awe of the work teachers do. I have 3 children in Francis House schools. My oldest has ADHD, my middle has ADHD and dyslexia, and my youngest was born an old soul, and his teachers have done an amazing job keeping him engaged. Going through my oldest's initial diagnosis and developing a plan was an emotional process, one that was made easier working with teachers and the staff at Cosley Elementary. Once we realized my daughter was struggling with more than ADHD, I set out to find the best ways to help her. Cosley had a presentation with a dyslexia specialist that was invaluable. I spoke endlessly with reading specialists in the district. I honestly cannot express what they have done to make my daughter not just pass, but thrive, never once believing her dyslexia would hold her back. Then COVID. Our kids were virtual. Virtual really highlighted how much work these teachers do. Getting assignment alerts at 2 a.m., teachers driving to our homes to pick up writing assignments and dropping off treats, another teacher working with me to make sure my daughter had things like Snap and Read on her Chromebook, books on tape, etc. My oldest entered middle school virtually, and staying on top of assignments was a struggle for him. The teachers were always willing to take my calls and answer my emails. Their entire job was made 100% harder, and they rose to the occasion for our kids like they always do. I remember the first time I watched a particular teacher instruct a virtual class. Getting 20 first graders to be engaged through a Chromebook, these humans do not get paid enough for the immense talents and expertise. She was the one who helped us figure out how goal-motivated my son was. I still use it to this day. Thank you, board, teachers, administrators, cafeteria workers, custodians, support staff, and librarians. Our next comment is from Jarrett Pillsbury. To all members of the Francis Howe community, esteemed board members, Dr. Hoven, Dr. Rumpus. Jarrett Pillsbury, parent of 2 children in the district. Thank you for your time this evening, and I do hope everyone is staying safe given the road conditions. I had the honor of attending Francis Howe North's National Honor Society induction ceremony last night and wanted to share some observations from that event. The Master of Ceremonies welcomed 111 inductees, their families, and friends to this special occasion and began the event by stating it was among his favorites in which to participate because it was a gathering of the best that North had to offer and, quote, who wouldn't want to be around that? Agreed. The students to be inducted represented a diverse cross-section of the student body, yet they all possessed strength of character and wisdom. How can I say this about 111 inductees, most of whom I don't know? Certainly they all possessed strengths academically to be considered for National Honor Society, but how can I say anything about their character or whether their academic performance equates to wisdom? If you attended the event, you already know where I'm going. Each of the 111 inductees was asked to step to the podium and provide a short statement as to their life motto and reasoning behind it. And with each one, I saw traits that any member of this district would celebrate. It took courage to step to the microphone, which all the inductees had. But beyond that, humor, a sense of fun, speaking truth, supporting one another, caring for one another and their community, belief in a strong work ethic, perseverance, taking up a challenge, facing their fears and overcoming them, living the life that matters to them, faithfulness, perspective, standing up for themselves and others, and in the end, kindness, compassion, and humbleness. Strength of character and wisdom were present among all the inductees, and in great measure, I might add. I considered it a privilege to sit in that audience last night, hearing from all these young people to get a glimpse of who they are, what they value, and what they aspire to. The principal noted these young people were there in that space being honored in large part due to the considerable efforts of teachers, staff, and their parents, guardians, and families. All working together, our community helped these young people become who they are last night and today. As the ceremony reached its end, some beautiful words were shared for a beloved teacher and sponsor of the NHS who is retiring after a 35-year teaching career at the end of the 21-22 school year. Every parent, guardian, family member, and friend to the North community gathered in that space last night stood up and applauded her for her hard work, dedication, and commitment to those young people and so many before them whose lives she touched. Thank you, board, for supporting her and so many other teachers, faculty, and staff in their efforts to stand up for the student population and this community in a time of great and historic upheaval when so very much is uncertain, so very much is changing, and so much work remains to be done. I would call upon the entire FHSD community to stand up for North values in public education, for the values those young people represent, and to come together as one community to work towards solutions for the betterment of the whole of the district, not tearing one another down, but building each other up. Thank you for your time. The next speaker is Heidi Conrad. Hello, board members and FHSD community. My name is Heidi Conrad, and I'm a parent of 3 kids in the district, one at FHC, one at Sager, and one at Warren Elementary. First off, I would like to thank the board for calling this snow day. I know that yesterday it seemed unimaginable that we could have snow and ice less than 24 hours later, but here we are, and I think the layer of ice outside my home evidences that calling off school was the right decision. And I think I speak for 90% of the district when I say I was happy not to be woken up at 5 a.m. today with the school cancellation phone call. These past 2 years have been extremely challenging for all of us, and I think none more so than our teachers and administrators. First, they have been caught in the culture wars occurring at school boards everywhere. Second, they have had to worry about the health of themselves and their families.
Third, they have had to figure out new ways to teach with very little support. I want to thank the school administration and staff that have supported me and my children in this district. I want to thank the teachers and staff at Warren who have always returned my calls and emails and listened to my concerns. When I had a concern about a classroom situation, Warren administration and the teacher sat down with me to work out a solution for a successful year. I also never worried about if my kids were getting enough support at Warren. All of my kids have had their strengths and weaknesses recognized, and where necessary, additional support was given to engage them and improve weaknesses. I also want to thank the Sager staff because, first of all, they continue to work with preteens and young teens on a regular basis, but also the staff that have gotten to know my kids and check in on them. The teachers who reached out when the pandemic first started and did their best to make sure my son was engaged, the counselors who gave advice on challenging courses for my kids, and the administration that keeps it all running. And last but not least is FHC, who I view as a major community partner of Cottleville. I have learned that high school is a whole new world and they are helping our teens figure out their place in it. At the high school, children are transitioning to adults and the staff there have to work every day to educate the kids on that responsibility. Thank you, FHSD. Next comment is from Christine Hyman. My name is Christine Hyman. My daughter is a freshman at FHN. I would again like to take a moment to express my gratitude to the board for handling the past several months with grace and confidence. As another school year rolls into the homestretch, I'd ask for your grace in a couple other issues I've seen arise in our community. First, our teachers and students must be taken care of. And are we making sure learning gaps are closing from the disruption of the pandemic? Are our teachers okay? Check on them often and hear their words. Believe what they tell you. They walk the walk every single day. Are our students safe? All of them. Our young students, our older students, our transgender students. I ask about our LGBTQ students because I feel a segment of our community has recently taken the position of stepping us back rather than making these already vulnerable students continue to feel welcome. FHSD does a beautiful job allowing our students to be themselves. I would hate to see any student's humanity come into question, become a flashpoint topic, or another wedge issue. Please continue to make them comfortable and welcome. I ask that you keep important things like safety, learning, and accountability at the forefront and make sure our community remains the very best we can be. Thank you. Next speaker is Grayson Justice. I've watched many of the school board meetings, and from the other side, all I hear is ban mask, ban CRT, and Black history. Now it's ban books. Why? Because it makes their quote unquote children uncomfortable to read. Here are some of the following books that are challenged in Missouri. All Boys Aren't Blue, Black Girl Unlimited, Fences, Genderqueer, The Bluest Eye, The Handmaid's Tale, The Hate You Give, The Book is Gay. Most of these book titles are targeted on three types that the other side hate: LGBTQ community, African Americans, and women's rights. What's next? Banning books on the Holocaust? Well, it's already happening in some states. Heck, the GQP are making laws like suing teachers on teaching about these three topics that the other side hate, and submitting your one-year lessons that got to be approved before a certain due date. If we live in a world where a group of people burn down bookstores or libraries because of different ideas and viewpoints, we'll be living in a dictatorship, but it did in 1920s, 30s Germany. You know, the greatest libraries has something in it to offend everyone. It's time the other side to stop worrying the elections will be rigged by guns and pulling the plug on the voting machines, teachers teaching students about Black history because it's their choice, and banning books because it makes them uncomfortable, not the student. And focus on your child's health and safety by wearing a mask and get vaccinated and get more kids to read books, instead having your child get your guns from your safe place and kill every student, teacher, and staff. It's their choice to choose whatever book they like to read, not yours. Happy Black History Month. Next speaker is Ben Davis. I would like to share these thoughts from the 6th grade humanistic essays of John Stuart Mill. This is a quote. The disposition of mankind, whether as rulers or as fellow citizens, to impose their own opinions and inclinations as a rule of conduct on others is so energetically supported by some of the best and by some of the worst feelings incident to human nature that it is hardly ever kept under restraint by anything but want of power. And as the power is not declining but growing, unless a strong barrier of moral conviction can be raised against the mischief, we must expect in the present circumstances of the world to see it increase. He follows this later with, is another quote, the entire history of social improvement has been a series of transitions by which one custom or institution after another, from being a supposed primary necessity of social existence, has passed into the rank of an universally stigmatized injustice and tyranny. So it has been with the distinctions of slaves and free men, nobles and serfs, patricians and plebeians, and so it will be, and in part already is, with the aristocracies of color, race, and sex. Sincerely, Ben Davis, Francis Howell parent. Next speaker is Carriezielkowski. Good evening. I am a parent in the district. My children are 8th graders at Barnwell. I will start by applauding FHSD teachers and staff. The past few school years have presented many challenges and they have persevered. My children's teachers work very hard. I notice when their teachers give up weeknights and weekends for robotics practices and competitions. I notice when they plan after-school book clubs to help students develop a love of reading. I notice when their teachers add grades to Infinite Campus late at night or on the weekends. I notice when my children come home excited about a lesson because their teacher incorporated engaging materials or challenged their thinking. When middle schoolers talk about a lesson, you know it was great. Teachers in FHSD are rock stars and superheroes. Tonight, I will also use my voice to continue to support diversity, equity, and inclusion in FHSD schools. I fully support the board's resolution in response to racism and discrimination adopted on August 20th, 2020. The district strives toward empowering students to be lifelong learners prepared for the future. To achieve this tall order, students must continue to be open to new experiences and have the opportunity to listen to different and diverse voices. They must be taught to think critically and must work to challenge systems that no longer work. The district must ensure that all students have what they need to be successful by providing materials, opportunities, and support to ensure high levels of learning for all students in all schools. To this end, books centering on people of color, LGBTQ+ individuals, and women should not be unnecessarily scrutinized. I recently sat on a book challenge committee for the book George. It is a lovely book where a young trans girl finds out more about herself. The book was retained, but there should be no question that books like these should be in our libraries available to students. While I may not personally like every book, all students need to see themselves in some books. In addition, all students need to see people who are different from them in books, to see people from different races, cultures, backgrounds, genders, religions, sexual orientations, and more. Thank you for continuing to support the amazing FHSD teachers, as well as a diverse, equitable, and inclusive curriculum. Next speaker is Beth Abraham. Good evening. My family has been part of the Francis Howell School District since 2010. My daughters are currently students at Francis Howell High School. Thank you for allowing my statement to be read at tonight's meeting. I have attended some board meetings in the past but have not spoken at them. Given recent rhetoric that has been presented both at meetings and in the community in general, I felt it was time to speak up. The past 2 years have been a roller coaster ride for everyone in our district: students, parents, teachers, support staff, administrators, board members, everyone. It seems like it has been one crisis after another. And if COVID, masking, and virtual learning weren't enough, now we face groups seeking to censor our libraries and limit our teachers' abilities to actually teach. It is almost too much to bear. Every day, my high school-age daughters ask me why people can't just behave appropriately, trust our teachers and our schools, and stop being so divisive. I struggle to come up with answers for them. With that being said, I would like to take this opportunity to set a few things straight. Many parents in the school district love our schools. We love the staff who take care of our kids. We trust the people who make decisions about curriculum and books. We appreciate the hard work that you all do each and every day to make our children better human beings. Cumulatively, my family has worked with over 48 different teachers. Each one has made an imprint on the lives of my daughters and made them better people. Also, it cannot go unsaid that our custodial staffs at each school go above and beyond to make our schools safe, functional, clean places to be. And these are just a few of the people who have made our district a wonderful place to be. Finally, as a parent, I trust the systems our district has in place. I believe books and curriculum are chosen based on what value they can bring to our society. I strongly oppose the idea of removing books or classes because they make some among us uncomfortable. For example, the number of curse words in a book is not a measure of its value. Censorship is a slippery slope. To limit the access to classes or materials based on individual objections is dangerous. I believe the processes we have in place provide parents with enough control to make limitations within their families while not limiting the choices of others. In closing, I would again like to thank the people who have worked so hard over the past years to help our kids. Please know that there are many, many parents who support our schools and are ashamed of the chaos being caused by people with their own agendas. I am only one voice, but I will use it to be a voice of support, of appreciation, and of defense of our wonderful schools. Next speaker is Elise Hyman. My name is Elise Hyman. I'm a freshman at FHN. As a student, I have truly seen the inner working of the school. Over the past months of the 21-22 school year, something has become very obvious. No student has issues with the points brought to this board. Students do not complain about certain books and do not care who walks in the bathroom with them. We have classes to attend and assignments to do. We simply don't have time to instigate someone trying to use a preferred restroom. There is no socialism or Marxism. We students learn for perspective and education, not indoctrination. To try to implement these ideas like banning use of preferred bathrooms, books, or Black history just disrupts the peace we have already created with the BSU and GSA at our building. I ask all parents to ask themselves, does your kid really care that much about these policies, or is it just you? Thank you. Next speaker is Kim Hutton. Good evening. I am here to express my deep gratitude to the FHM principals, administrators, teachers, and coaches who played an instrumental role in paving the way for the inclusive and wildly successful experience my 18-year-old transgender son had for the past 3 years. My child began telling me that they were a boy at the age of 2.5. While we knew what transgender was, it's impossible to be prepared for this. I couldn't possibly begin to tell you everything we went through in those early years as we sought help and direction for our child, but I can tell you that the fear was overwhelming. After 4 years of therapy with experts across the country, we were advised that he knows who he is, and to make him live his life as female would be cruel and inhumane. You need to give him a boy name, boy clothing, and a boy haircut, and you need to find a school that will support him in every way. He socially transitioned in 2010 at the age of 7, and we inquired with Becky David about his use of the boys' bathroom. The school told us he would have to use the bathroom that matched his genitalia. We knew that this would devastate him, and so he attended private schools with a focus on the value of diversity through 9th grade. Private schools were extremely small, and he asked to attend our local public high school for a larger social experience. And so in 2018, we reached out to FHN to see if their policies had changed. We were thrilled to find that there were over a dozen gender-independent kids at the high school, and our son could use the boys' bathroom. We also met with the principal, counselor, and coach so that he could access the boys' locker room. We learned that our son would be the first transgender student in the FHSD to use the locker room that they identified with. A plan was put in place and initially followed, but as our son became more comfortable, he moved freely throughout the locker room, as did all of the boys. It's important to note that our child is openly transgender. I can't say that every boy in the locker room knew our son, but many did, and there was not a single issue amongst the boys. I am deeply grateful to FHN and FHSD for making my son's experience possible. He will graduate as a solid student with 3.2 GPA and, more importantly, with tons of great friends, which I think speaks to the student body's willingness to embrace gender diversity and adapt to the growing number of gender-independent kids needing access to the facilities they identify with. In contrast, a good friend of mine had to sue their Blue Springs School District High School in Kansas City for discrimination because they would not give access to her transgender son to use the boys' bathroom or locker room. After 5 years of lawsuits, appeals, and Missouri Supreme Court involvement, their child was awarded $4.1 million in December. It's amazing that the FHSD schools are doing the right thing and not wasting resources, time, and money on unnecessary lawsuits. And I am proud to be a parent in this truly brilliant school district that embraces all children and all differences. Thank you so much. Next comment is from Nicole Colesper. Jane, cut me off when we hit 30 minutes, please. Sharing with permission from a parent in the neighboring district with a journey to share. I went on an undercover mission and joined a couple of parent Facebook groups that focus on parents' rights because, well, I was bored and wanted to be entertained. Here are my findings, and if they upset you at this point, I don't care because there are crazy people in the world. Number 1, parents want school choice. Fine, I get it. They want the best education for their kids. I do too. However, out of the 2,000 plus members in these groups, there wasn't one post of how to make the schools better. All they did was complain and send messages to Urich Schmidt and his cronies. You know what? As a parent, you have a responsibility to work with your school proactively in a professional manner. In my school, not once have I ever been turned away or have I felt my voice wasn't heard. You know why? Because I don't approach the school being an adversary. Number 2, parents claim they don't know what their students are being taught. I have 2 thoughts on this. 1, it is untrue. I know exactly what the curriculum is. Also, I talk with my son about his classes and what is going on. Is the curriculum perfect? Of course not. But instead of complaining, I didn't see one proposal to make things better other than threaten to take their kids out of the school. Number 3, blaming teachers for anything. Listen, I know there are good teachers and bad teachers, but the vast majority of teachers are looking out for your kids' well-being and best interest. Missouri has the lowest paid teachers in the U.S. Think about that for a second. I look back growing up and I can't fit all of the role models I had that were teachers on both hands. One teacher had a huge impact on me and gave me confidence that I never had before. Another was the most amazing teacher because she taught me how to be creative and express myself. I wouldn't be who I am today without those role models in my life. Number 4, if you want input into what your kids learn at school, take action. Go to board meetings, run for school board, do research on why the curriculum is being taught. It is scary that we have parents that want to ban books from school. Are you kidding me? Catcher in the Rye and To Kill a Mockingbird had such a huge influence on me growing up. I can't imagine not having the opportunity to experience them. Just because you don't agree with something doesn't mean it shouldn't be taught. If you want, homeschool your kids. Oh, that's too much work? You want someone making $25K a year to do it for you, right? The people wanting books banned are the same people that go to church every week and listen to passages out of the Bible. Let me know if you want passages from the Bible that would make the books you want to ban blush. I'll be glad to give them to you. Number 5, want their tax dollars to be able to be used to go to private schools. No, make your school better. make your community better, but to take money away from public schools and send your kid to a religious private school using that money shouldn't be encouraged. It should be illegal. Separation between church and state. I will never support my tax dollars going to any religious organization. Try out a charter school if you want. Even though they drain regular public school of tax dollars, they are public schools too, without the oversight needed, with the ability to discriminate, without the right resources for special education. You'll likely be running back to public schools. Their teachers make less too. Number 6, this is 100% a play to gain more power by the government. The right says they want less government. Really? How is banning books, forcing curriculum on you less government? It isn't. It's a power grab. All right. Thank you. Next speaker is Allison Abraham.
Joel, just a moment, just to let you know, we have 24 seconds, so this will be the last speaker.
Okay. Hello, my name is Allie Abraham, and I'm a freshman at Francis Howell High School. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I just wanted to give thanks to teachers and staff members of my high school and all teachers and staff members within the district. This year has been very difficult from other years, and I feel like we need to appreciate the teachers and staff members of the district. They had to change a lot to better suit the students they have this year, and I feel like they need to be more appreciated by both adults and parents and students within the district. As a student, I hear a lot about parents in the district who are upset about books within our libraries or history we are taught in our class. I would like to kindly disagree with those parents who think that those books within our libraries or the history being taught in our lessons are bad. The truth is we should not try to hide our history or the history of others. Our teachers give us materials to enlighten us. I trust my teachers to know what is appropriate for me and my fellow students. For some topics that teachers teach us, I understand that students and parents might not be comfortable with it, but that does not mean it should not be taught. Sooner or later, the students will be exposed to this information, and I feel better when a teacher within a school is teaching me that instead of me being an adult and learning things the hard way. Besides, many of the teachers I had in my 10 years of school influenced me to become a better person in life. My art teacher is a very relaxed yet enjoyable teacher who pushes me to try new things creatively. My math teacher is a great teacher who is great with teaching the material to his students and helps students who have questions. My Spanish teacher is an exemplary teacher who pushes her students to do their best and keeps them in check a lot of the time too. To get to a point, there are many great teachers and staff members within this district. I believe that they need to be better appreciated by parents and students within this district. I understand that parents in the district might not be happy with the lessons being taught or the books within our libraries, and they are trying to protect and do what they think is best for their children. I respect their opinions, but I see things differently. I feel like I should not be limited with the choices of what I read and what I learn because parents, who are not mine, are not comfortable with their own kids learning things. Thank you for this opportunity for my voice to be heard. It means a lot to me that you are willing to hear the voice of a student, and I appreciate you for taking what I said into consideration. Is this time up? Okay, all right. Thank you. And I guess now, Ms. Lang, I can go into FHEA comments?
Yep, thank you.
FHEA comments. Good evening, Board of Education, members of the Cabinet, and patrons of the district. My name is Anita Keener, and I am the president of the Francis Howell Education Association, or FHEA. I hope that all have had a safe day today. I'd like to start off with some very good news that was brought to FHEA's attention last week at our monthly FHEA officers and cabinet meeting. FHEA was told by the COO, Kevin Supple, that the district will be receiving an additional $8.8 million in revenue due to the financial institution tax and corporate income tax. With the financial institution tax, known as FIT, we received $2.6 million in fiscal year 20. Last year, fiscal year 21, $78,000, and this year, fiscal 22, $6.5 million, almost triple from fiscal 20. Then FHEA was told $1 million is going to capital projects, which is always confusing to understand since we passed a $244 million bond. Why would the district continue to put operating money in capital projects? Couldn't that money be better used to help our students? And with the reduction of corporate income tax, the district received $2.3 million in January to offset any loss of FIT revenue. That is $8.8 million of additional revenue the district had not expected. Congratulations to our Sager Middle School teacher who has won the $500 MNEA Reliant Grant Tuition Award. Our para and custodian vacancies are at their highest. These vacancies put more on certified/teachers' plates. We have become aware of the district's plan to level the paras for the end of this year instead of how they typically do it in the spring for the following year. Leveling is something the district does every year that moves paras around where needed for the following school year. But because of the vacancies of paras this school year, the district is considering moving the paras now. It is basically robbing Peter to pay Paul. This would not only upset the paras current in a building that they know and love, but the teacher that counts on them. We understand the need for paras, but why don't we figure out why they are not coming to Francis Howell instead of shifting them to different buildings, upsetting those who are affected? Maybe the $1 million shifted to capital projects from the financial institute tax would be better suited to address the para crisis. In closing, we hope everyone stayed safe today, enjoys their extended weekend, and returned refreshed. Thank you. And there were no comments submitted by FISPA for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Scholes. Next up, we will have our MSBA board report.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's board report for the month of February. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at what's known as competency-based education, the idea that students should advance in their education based on their mastery of skills and expectations, not based on seat time. A new statewide group called the Success Ready Students Work Group is studying the issue here in Missouri. That group is made up of educators, school board members, administrators, parents, and other stakeholders. One of the facilitators of the group is Dr. Pam Hedgepeth, and she tells us competency-based learning meets the individual needs of students.
So competency-based learning is really centered on student learning. And it is an ongoing process of having really clear learning targets, and then students and teachers and parents using assessment tools to really identify where the student learning is. And then where student learning is, then designing instructional practices that really meet the individual needs of students. It's highly motivating for students. It keeps parents and teachers and students very informed on where the current learning level is, so that the learning can be scaffolded and supported to really meet the individual needs of students.
Another facilitator for the project is Dr. Mike Fulton. He tells us the goal of the group is to develop a framework for the use of competency-based learning in Missouri.
As part of that framework, redesign the current state assessment system, including the MAP test, to better support students, educators, and inform parents on where their child is on their learning continuum and support them in their growth toward being college, career, and workplace ready. We also are going to have a component of this work that will speak to the need for flexibility by school districts who want to innovate in this space of competency-based learning and assessment.
The Success Ready Students Work Group will be holding a series of meetings during the coming weeks with the goal of having a framework developed by early May. We will be keeping you informed about this group's progress. Teacher recruitment and retention continues to be a major issue throughout Missouri. School districts were facing a teacher shortage prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it has only worsened during the past 2 years. The minimum starting teacher salary in Missouri is $25,000 right now, the lowest in the nation. Governor Mike Parson proposed raising that minimum to $38,000 during his recent State of the State address to the General Assembly.
Unfortunately, Missouri is currently ranked 50th in the United States for starting teacher pay, and half of our new teachers leave the profession by their 5th year. This is unacceptable, and we must do better. That's why we are proposing to raise teacher pay in every corner of this state.
Under Governor Parson's proposal, the state would fund 70% of the cost of raising the minimum teacher salary to $38,000, and local school districts would be responsible for 30% of the cost. There are many other issues being considered in the current session of the General Assembly that are of great concern to MSBA and school board members throughout the state, including the expansion of charter schools, making school board elections partisan, and moving school board elections to the November election date. As the legislative session progresses, we will keep you updated on developments again this year through our Legislative Voice newsletter, sent to members via email each Friday during the session, our Twitter feed with up-to-the-minute developments through critical issue alerts and periodic webinars. We urge you to stay in contact with your legislators during the session and communicate to them the impact legislation will have on your school district. And don't forget, this year's MSBA Legislative Forum is scheduled for March 7th in Jefferson City. Check the MSBA website for registration information. MSBA also is pleased to once again sponsor School Board Recognition Week in Missouri, March 6th through 12th this year, as proclaimed by Governor Parson. It's a great opportunity for school districts and communities to recognize the work of school board members and the important role local boards of education play as leaders of our public schools. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we will have a Proposition S update. Mr. Jeremy Butler.
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. Rich, if you go to the next slide. So good evening, board. I appreciate you allowing me a chance to give you an update as usual. The structure of the update is a little bit different this tonight, so I'll try to incorporate some opportunities for questions if you guys may have them. So first of all, 801 Corporate Drive, exciting things happen there. As you're aware, that project was awarded Hoff Construction at the January board meeting. Our architects and design team continue to work with the administration team and some of the other people in the district just to get ready to move over there, including Union and some of the other people. So there is a lot of good work happening, just interesting things like assigning room numbers and office numbers and conference room numbers. So stuff like that is ongoing. A lot of AV coordination with the technology department is happening. There's a lot of conference rooms and breakout rooms in that building, and we want to make sure as soon as we walk into that space that it's completely ready to go for everyone that uses it. So the cubicles have also been removed from the building. Not all the cubicles, just the ones that were not going to be reused. As you probably remember, there were quite a few cubicles in that building itself. So a lot of those have been removed and to get out of the way to actually start construction. So next slide, Rich, thank you. FF&E review and coordination continues. So FF&E is what we call furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So this is, think of desk chairs and tables and stuff like that. So we're beginning the process of making sure that we have all those items, inventorying what was actually in the 801 space, and prepare to move over there. On the construction side of the project, the material procurement and shop drawing process is moving forward. Demolition of walls, ceilings has absolutely started. Most of that work is happening on the second floor as we speak, but they're moving on to the first floor very soon. So, and then along with that, our MEFP, or mechanical, electrical, fire protection, plumbing, our infrastructure work has started. So especially our electricians have been on site in great force working to remove some of the stuff we won't be using and start to upgrade our services for what we'll actually use in the future. Moving on to Francis Howell North. We do have some nice pictures and a little drone video to show you tonight, but really a lot of the same stuff you've been hearing for the last couple of months is still ongoing. We're still putting in footings, grade beams, foundation work is continuing, mainly in the main level and storm shelter area, which is the part of the building that's closest to actually the Henderson campus. Some of the finished concrete work is going. We're talking about slab on grades when we do that. So a lot of the slab on grade work is turning the corner. The weather has impacted that slightly. Nothing to be concerned about, but we don't like days like this. We like days like it was yesterday. So some of the slabs are getting poured and others of them we're kind of holding off right now to actually get in. And then all of our MEFP work continues on the underground. So below all the slabs, we obviously have to put conduit and plumbing and electric services in. That's really ongoing before we pour any of those slabs. Next slide, please, Rich. So here is a interesting shot. This is a new piece of software where SM Wilson is actually using, but we'll see some drone video in a minute. You can start to actually see just how much of the school is actually getting built. You can obviously see a footprint beginning. You see what we call the horseshoe down there on the middle to the left of the screen. That is the lower level of the academic area. The shop areas are down there, the very similar layout to what Francis L. High School has. Then you see the upper levels being built as well. So the difference in floor elevation there is foundation walls and concrete. So on those upper levels, that'll be the main upper level of the school building. One of the things that's really neat and unique about this school is you will actually walk out into the gymnasium on the mezzanine level. So if you think about that, a lot of colleges have the deal where you walk out and then you look down into the actual building, and you can actually see that now in the upper right corner. So that's actually the gymnasium floor. So you can see the upper area. That's actually where you'll walk into the gym, and the gym is actually at a lower level. So those two depressed areas on the right are actually the gymnasium, the main gym, and then the secondary gym. So just kind of, for the first time, we're really starting to see the building take shape and what it's going to look like in the future. The steel does come on March 1st. That'll be a very, very exciting time. We'll start to actually see the building go up. They'll be building the building from left to right, or from the area furthest away from Henderson to the area closest to Henderson. So some really exciting work happening over the next 60 days. So Rich, if you would go forward. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. We already talked about this, but this is some of the slab work being poured. You saw some of that. You see the whirly birds on top of the concrete actually pouring the slab. You see some of our blankets sitting out there, and all the concrete getting pumped. So again, just concrete slabs being installed. Go ahead, Rich. More concrete slabs that have been installed. These are ones that have actually cured on the lower level. Again, you start to look up and see our foundation wall in front of you. This picture is actually shot looking towards Henderson Elementary. This is the area where you actually see the first round of steel being erected on the site. Go ahead, Rich. Then here you see that wall on the back side. I talk a lot about buttresses when we talk, but these are the buttresses that actually hold the wall back. So we put these in. There's a substantial amount of concrete that has to go behind these walls to hold them in so we can backfill them and actually build the buildings. Just, a lot of form work, a lot of stuff happening, but these, when we talk about buttresses and how we pin the walls back, this is what we're referring to. Okay, Rich. And then just again, some more rock and some more MEFP rough getting ready to pour. So go ahead. So Rich will click on this. This will be a drone video. Again, we're looking towards Henderson as this video starts. So Henderson is over by the water tower there on the right side. Again, we can see the structure. The football field is to our bottom right now, the future stadium. Again, we're looking towards Henderson. You can begin to see what we talked about earlier with the gymnasiums on the right. Same shot, gymnasiums on the right. Some of the wings. This will be 3 floors of steel coming up in this little U we see as we move towards Henderson. So we talked about a lot of this already in the other photo we saw, but you can see a lot of the slabs getting poured and just how much work is actually going on the site right now. This road that goes around it is just a temporary construction road. It's required by the fire marshal. So that's what you see, and we also use that as the access road to drive around. And then you'll see these red barricades that separate the construction traffic from the actual buses and the students. So those are still in place and being used for safety purposes on the site.
Okay, thank you. Board, any questions, comments?
A couple more things too, Mary, but I will hold for a second if they have any comments before I go on.
Okay, go on.
Okay, thank you. So the other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit tonight is allowances. So allowances are something that we've hit on a couple times in some of our GMP projects. And just to speak a little bit about those tonight with the board, it's something you're going to hear more and more about as we build these projects. But an allowance is something that we establish in the contract for items that we cannot necessarily identify the scope of currently. So I'll pick on 801. We have an allowance for AV equipment. We do not know the full scope of all the AV work yet. Obviously, if we were to wait to incorporate all of that in the drawings, we still would not be able to bid the project. So what we do in this case is we allocate money for it. The contract, we then put that within the contract of the general contractor or the CMAR. So in this case, the AV allowance, I believe, was $50,000 to $70,000. And then what happens with that is the contractor actually tracks those allowances, and it's our money to spend. They purchase it through their contracts, and then we have to authorize that money as it gets spent. It's tracked by the contractor, and then since that's our money, any leftover money at the end of the project is actually returned to the district in the means of a deductive change order. Or on the other hand, if we go over that allowance, it is a change order to the contractor. So you're going to hear more and more about allowances. I just wanted to take a second to make sure the board understood what those are. We try not to use them that often, but there are a handful of those being put in projects, and I wanted to just take a moment at this meeting to explain it a little further. So next slide, please, Rich. This is also a new dashboard we're going to use for you guys. So this gives us 3 values. It's tracking 2 different allowances for Francis Howell North, what we call an escalation allowance and a GMP allowance for drawing changes made from the 99% drawings to the 100% set. You see it's at 1.1 million. That's actually the GMP allowance. The escalation allowance is actually hidden on this slide. I apologize for that, but it's about $1 million. So we haven't spent any of that money yet. So this is saying right now we've expended $0 in either one of those allowances. So in essence, the district still has $2 million to spend, but we will track these and we will show these to the board as we move forward. On the right side, you'll see the actual billing amount that has been billed to the district for the job. So to date, SM Wilson has billed us 12.6% of the project. Obviously, as the project moves on, we'll see that dial turn from right to left. So we can tweak these, and if the board would like to see more information here, we would be happy to show it. But it's our first pass at trying to give a little more financial information to the board as they request it. So, Rich, next slide, please. So I also want to speak a little bit about cost savings tonight. I'm going to try to go as quick as I can on this, but I think this is important. So we've been doing a lot of value engineering within this project. We've talked about this before. There's some definitions of what value engineering actually is. I would say value engineering is exactly what it says, value. We're looking for things within the project that bring value. So we're not looking at things that specifically have major impacts on the design or on the students or on the staff. We're really looking for things that, is there a better way to do something? Is there a better product that we can buy? Is there something that we can do to do this in a be better stewards of the dollar, is how I would say it. So I'm going to be talking a lot about this in the next 2 to 3 months, and we're going to be going over a lot of what we're doing actually there. So I would remind the board that as part of the GMP contract, we had a $6.4 million VE target established within the GMP. So we already knew we could get $6.4 million of VE reduced in the GMP. And that's one of our targets have been so far. Obviously, our goal is to hopefully go over that. If we go over that, then that's even additional money that the district would receive back. So some of those items that are within that $6.4 million that we've already capitalized on. Again, just 2 items, but they're fairly big items. We've chosen a alternate ground face block for savings of about $210,000. In this case, this was actually a product that the architect liked more than actually the original product, the original ground place block we were using. So in this case, we were actually able to get something that we liked more for a savings of almost over $200,000. So that was great. we were able to also negotiate with the brick veneer supplier and receive $100,000 savings just on the brick itself. So the exact brick we wanted, we were able to apply some pressure and save some money on that. So there'll be a lot of more of those to coming, but just two of the first things out of the gate that we're seeing some substantial savings on. And then I also want to talk about value, some of the cost reductions we're doing in the field. So keep in mind that this is a GMP, so any money that we don't spend comes back to us. So one of the things we did over the past 60 days is we elected not to pour any of the slab-on-grade concrete while the ground had frost in it. You have to wait for the frost to come out to pour it. You can heat the soil, you can put blankets on it, you can do a lot of things to actually bring the frost out of the ground before you pour the concrete. It was between myself and SM Wilson, we made the decision that the slabs could actually wait. They were not on the critical path, and we elected not to spend the money to heat the soil, and by saving quite a bit of money, probably something in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $100,000 of money that we did not need to spend for items that really weren't critical path work. So just something to make the board aware of these little things that happen every day. The parking lot elevations within the design itself, we think that we can lower the parking lot, the student parking lot, by 2 feet, which won't make a difference at all for watershed or anything like that, and save a substantial amount of money in importing materials. So we would actually have to import less material from off-site locations, which would actually save us quite a bit. This savings could be well over $500,000. So we're working on that with our architects and continue to try to do that. Just a couple of other ones really quick that I want to hit on. We have decided to eliminate the steel primer. You prime steel with a gray paint is the best way I can say it. It's kind of a normal practice, but really isn't necessary in our project because we don't have a lot of exposed steel. So this is something that we actually have eliminated from our project. This number is in excess of $300,000 of savings. So just something very simple that in working with SM Wilson and our steel fabricator, we were able to come up with. We also decided that on the elevator stop, we were going to remove the elevator stop on the roof and just use stairs instead. That was able to eliminate a substantial amount of brick and structural work. And then one of the last things I wanted to make the board aware of is that we're working on a revised masonry design. So we're looking at the steel inside the masonry, not the actual brick itself, but a substantial amount of work with our structural engineer to actually reduce some of the rebar and the reinforcing that may not be required to save money. And again, these are hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of saving changes that we're looking at. So there'll be a lot more information on this. Actually, Rich, go to the next slide, please. Yeah, we had a meeting this morning with SM Wilson, myself, district personnel to go through the VE items, and there will be more information coming to the board. We will be going through these. You will see a document that shows all of these. We have definitely hit our target of $6.4 million, and I think are moving to the good side of that as we speak. But just a huge thanks to everyone, including SM Wilson and Honer and our engineers. This has been a lot of work, and it's starting to really pay off for I think the district and its kids. So that's good news. And the goal of this is to have it finalized in the next 30 to 60 days. So I know that was a lot of information, but I did wanted to share it just to kind of give the board a feel for what's been going on in the background. So Rich, next slide. I think that might be it. Yeah, okay, that's it. So thank you, Ms. Lang. I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if Mr. Supple has anything to say.
Jeremy, thanks very much. I appreciate the report. I think it's interesting that, last month we saw the photos of that gigantic concrete wall, and now we can see how it's incorporated into the building design. I know that Orchard Farm just recently bid out their high school, and since that's another high school project in the St. Charles County area, I did ask you to do a real quick analysis of the comparison between their bids and the Francis Howell North project, and I think you have a couple slides on that you can share with us this evening.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, Rich, if you want to pull those up. as he's doing that, I'll just give the board a little background on this. So Orchard Farm did recently bid a project. I'm watching other construction projects constantly. One thing I would say is, Francis North was one of the first projects, even on a national level, to be bid of that size coming during or after the, whatever we want to call it, the COVID economy. So we are really watching other projects and to see if they are having the same challenges that we're having, and doing some comparison analysis. Now, we're not just doing that for North, we're actually trying to really watch things as we move forward. Obviously, we have a lot more projects to build. We're trying to do our best to actually understand the market. So this is a very high level comparison. I'm going to put a bunch of disclaimers on this at the end, so please keep that in mind. I did this very quickly, and I'm just trying to get us into the ballpark. But Orchard Farm did recently bid a new school, brand new school, on a piece of dirt out in their district. They actually award a grading package prior to bidding the project. That was actually completed previously under a different contract, very similar to what we did at Francis Howell North and also what we did at Francis Howell High School. Cost for that grading package was about $2.5 million. So that is outside of what we're talking about tonight. The new Orchard Farm High School is approximately 210,000 square feet. Howell North is about twice as big, or just a little under that. So our current school is 405,000 square feet, roughly. We're using very general numbers on that. One of the first things we saw is that they actually only received 3 bids on the Orchard Farm project. We're talking about a school that was, originally supposed to be $50 million and ended up costing about $80. But they actually did only get 3 bidders to bid the project, and actually only one of those bidders was located in the state of Missouri. So we're seeing a similar issues that we encountered in bidding our project, where it's just difficult to get contractors to bid work right now. I will tell you, 5 years ago, we would probably have seen 7 to 10 bidders on something of this size. So it just shows you how challenging the market is, how volatile the market is, how busy the market is for contractors right now. So their low bid received was $77.5 million. Again, that doesn't include the grading package, and we're going to tweak this a little bit, but our GMP so $77.5 million for 200,000 square feet. We're at a 164 for 405. So it just starts to give you a little bit of a general sense of where these two projects land in comparison to one another. Go to the next slide, please, Rich. I do have to do a couple of things to get these apples to apples. First of all, they had a $500,000 inclusion in their bids for allowances and 0 contingency. We actually have $2.2 million in our bids for allowances and almost $6 million in contingency. So I need to reduce those allowances and contingencies out of this number, actually, to get them apples to apples, so to say. I also need to add in the grading package of $2.5 million to the $77.5 million, where our site work is actually included in the 164. So I do those two things, again, very high per square foot with allowances, contingencies, and site work's taken into account. Orchard Farm around $379 a square foot. Francis Howell North around $386 a square foot. A delta of just somewhere between 1% and 2%. And then, Rich, if you go to the last slide, I just want to clarify, these costs don't reflect any alternates. There were alternates within the Orchard Farm project that would increase their square footage, so potentially make their square foot cost go down. It also, on our end, does not reflect the complexities that we have on our site. So our site construction is substantially more complicated than Orchard Farm. You can imagine they're working on a virgin piece of soil. It's just getting grading. We are working around existing kids. We have phase construction. We have a substantial amount of issues on our project dealing with that, in turn, cost quite a bit of money. So these numbers don't reflect any of these two variables. I really don't, I have some numbers internally that I'd be happy to share, but for this level of discussion, I've kind of excluded those things. Lastly, it does not reflect any architectural or programming differences between the schools. So, it's very difficult to pick our square footages because they aren't building the exact same school that Francis Howell's building, and we're not building the same school they are. So there obviously are different things, different materials, different programming and classrooms and gymnasiums and stuff like that. So we're trying to give a 50,000, view of what's going on. But what this analysis tells me is the market is continuing to see the same challenges and volatility it's seen in the past. And this is probably one of the second projects that's came out after us. And we're seeing costs that are very similar to what we encountered at Francis Howell. So I just wanted to make the board aware of that after Mr. Supple asked me for that information. So Kevin, I don't know if you have anything to add, but that would be my comments.
Jeremy, thank you for your work. I really appreciate it.
Board?
I'd be happy to answer any questions. Oh, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mrs. Lang.
You're fine. Board, any questions, comments?
Yeah, Mr. Butler, you mentioned that in about 30 days, we would know what some of these additional reductions and things. Does that mean in 30 days, we're going to really know what this is actually going to cost, or just how much we'll save?
That's a good question, Mrs. Walker. I would say, we're going to let the board know what EE items. It's not only just the cost, but it's what items have been removed from the project. So you'll see what I showed you earlier, where there'll be a list of items of things that we've installed to save money, and then what they were. But I would also remind everyone that the first $6.4 million of VE is already included within the contract. So, it's beyond the $6.4 million where we actually really start seeing reductions under the $164 million. So it's a two-pronged approach. The first is doing what we already committed to the board that we would do, which we have achieved. It's just a matter of showing it. And then hopefully exceeding that and continuing to make the number go down as much as possible.
And Mrs. Walker, I would just add to that we do have a guaranteed maximum price, so we know what the guaranteed maximum price for Francis Howell North is going to be. We've achieved the value engineering that Mr. Bettler talked about. On the previous slide, he showed you that we do have allowances and contingencies within the 164. So we won't know the final number until the project's done, because there's a possibility that most of that contingency may not be used, and so that will end up coming back to the district as a deductive change order. But we know what the maximum is. We won't be telling you in 30 days how much less it will be, because some of that will depend upon how much of the allowance and contingency gets used during the construction process.
So I guess my final question then is, so it's going to be the guaranteed maximum price minus the allowances. Is there any potential for additional cost savings other than the allowances already built in?
Yes, absolutely. So it is truly, that's a really good question, Walker. And what I would say is, we'll talk about the frost in the ground example. So, if in traditional bid setting, if the contractor does something that saves money, they keep that money. So they would choose to do things the cheapest way, because we have kind of an open book approach. If they do something that saves money, it goes to the bottom line, and then we save that money as well. The challenge, Mr. Supple is saying, is you don't know all that to the end, because one thing might save money and then another might cost some money. So, we don't want to become too optimistic, but I did like the way that Mr. Supple described it, as that is the worst case condition. Anytime we can be more efficient on site, it benefits us financially, if that makes sense. But that's a good question.
Thank you very much.
Board, any other questions, comments?
Yeah, could I make a comment?
Go for it, Mr. Hain.
Oh, okay, I didn't know you had recognized me or whatever. I just want to thank Jeremy for this Orchard Farm, Francis Howell North comparison, because it shows that we're truly in the ballpark, being the first ones out there. after the, with the COVID situation, everybody was kind of unsure of where it was, how it was going, and to have another project bid in our community that gives us a direct comparison is very helpful to show that, our project was at the current market conditions. So that was very reassuring. The other thing I want to point out is, and, I think Mr. Bettler did a great job of characterizing it, but these ad alternates, it's not just, it's a combination of things that Atlas Building is bringing forward, our own facilities department is bringing forward, SM Wilson, owner associates, architects, and even in some cases, the vendors are saying, hey, if you use a different type of material or different thing, you can get the same utility, but we can save money. So it isn't just one or two or three people. It is a community effort and a huge effort. And then even when these suggestions are made, they're not just like, okay, we save money, we're going to take it. That is therefore then verified to make sure that it's going to have the same or better functioning utility, and that we're not doing things to save money at a detriment to the building or detriment to the community or the district. So I want to thank everybody that's participating in that, because it really is a difficult task to get everybody to agree on some things to make the building cheaper, but not lose any functional utility or usefulness.
I have one question for Mr. Bettler. And Mr. Bettler, if you mentioned this and I didn't hear it, I do apologize. Well, you were talking about 801. Are we still on target to have that ready for our Francis Hall Union students in the fall? I know you had mentioned that walls are coming down and we were doing different things. Is that still on target to get our Francis Hall Union kids in there in the fall?
Yes, ma'am. We put it in the contract with Hall Construction that the schedule for that is that we would like that project to be turned over to us in early June and be completed, thereby giving us opportunities to move them over in June. We obviously don't want to wait to the last minute. So the hope would be in June, even by the end of June, that the move would be completed. We would be in the building for Union. Now, we would also like to see the first and third floor completed at the same time. But we have also made it very clear to our contractor that we don't want the first and third floor turned over at the detriment of the second floor. So the second floor is top priority. And all of it would be great in June, but the contract reads June 1 for the second floor, which is the union. I should have said that. Second floor is union. And then the first and third floor, we would like no later than July 1. So that's the way the contract reads. But and I would. Good news about Union is it is all inside. It's inside work. They were working today. Francis Hall North was shut down obviously all day because of the weather. So, I would be very upset and shocked if we weren't able to make that date. I think that our risk for that is very minimal. So I will continue to keep you updated on that, though. I think that's a good question. I'll put that in each deck every month, giving you an update of where we stand with that. Yeah,
I would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And Janet's question just raised another question for me. Do we anticipate there being any challenges getting furniture? I ordered a couch and they said it'd be 3 weeks, and they just let me know it's going to be 5 months. So if we get the building
crazy, isn't
it? What does that look like as far as getting the furniture and things like that? Are we going to struggle there?
That is,
I would imagine.
Absolutely a major struggle. I'm going to let Mr. Supple jump in if I say something wrong. So I believe the hope is intent is that we're not buying a lot of furniture, Mrs. Walker. So I think we're trying to reuse as much as we can there, chairs and desks, but there could be a minimal item that we need to get. You're right. We're doing an FF&E audit right now, furniture, fixtures, and equipment with our architects. It's supposed to conclude in the next 2 weeks. But you are right. We will need to get that order in no later than within the next 2 to 4 weeks to even have a chance to get it in time. Because, some things are still taking. I ordered something today that was 26 weeks out or something. I mean, it's crazy how long it takes to get things. So we're working on that. But I think the hope is that we won't have to order much. That is the hope. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
I just had one follow-up question.
Jeremy, when you were talking a little bit about the cost savings and going through that, I appreciate you taking the time to do it. Is there a way to actually track that we can put on the site? I know that there might be a little bit of difficulty with that, especially if we're saving some money and then something might cost a little bit to see where that comes off. But I don't know if that's too cumbersome or if there's a way that you can talk to us monthly or present that publicly.
We will.
Okay.
We will. The problem right now is that document is so big. It's got every comment on it. It's pages and pages and pages. We actually went through it today with the team, and it took almost 3 to 4 hours even to get through it. So I am working with Mr. Supple on a shortened version that we can present to the board in the next, maybe the next board meeting, maybe the one after, but definitely within the next 2 months. And then I would envision that absolutely getting posted or some version of it to the website for review. And we could track off that as well. So that is our intention, Doug. I just don't want to put something up until we have it cleaned up enough. Because a lot of what people want to see, they don't want to see all the notes and comments and emails, and that's tracking all of that for us as well. So I'll just take 1 second to go a little deeper with this. What you guys are really want to know about is the savings, and I understand that, but we also want to document why we made this. So we want to have, we want to document if we changed something in the plumbing. We talked to the engineers. They were okay with it. This was their concern. The architect was okay with it because obviously these are changes to our design. So we want them documented in the correct way for anyone down the road that would be like, well, why did they take this out or put it in? And then there's the story to tell. So when we clean that up, we'll absolutely get it to the board and present it. But yes, that is our intention.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Board, any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate all the updates.
Thank you.
Next up, we will have our strategic plan updates by Dr. Hoban.
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you, board. I was asked to provide an update for you in the community on where we are with strategic plan these days. I'm going to talk a little bit about some background, and then I'm going to turn over to Dr. Rumpus to talk about where we go next. So Rich, you can move it forward. This just shows, you've seen this information before, this just shows our 5 goal areas. Things have been a little different here for, really running on almost 2 years now based on COVID. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit here in just a second. But we've got our 5 goals here: life, college, career, and success, engaging learning environment, staff leaders and organizational performance, engaged family and community partnerships, and then resource effectiveness and efficiencies. So nothing new here. Rich, you can move it forward. This is really what I was getting at just a moment ago. So prior to our initial closure due to the pandemic back in March of 2020, so that was the first time when we actually closed across the whole state, all schools were closed. We had been doing some good work on strategic plan. Many action teams had been identified and had actually developed recommendations. A number of those had moved forward before we had to pause. But another thing that looking back at some of the work that we did, we actually had district level teams meeting and reviewing. Cabinet would review all of these different action teams and the recommendations and the implementations that were out there. And we would look at our funding, we would look at the capacity of people to do the work, and then we would give a green light to projects. Our last meeting to actually offer the green light to a number of projects occurred on March 3rd of 2020, which was just about 3 weeks before we closed the district for the rest of the school year. So right when we were ready to get a bunch of work off the ground, we immediately had to put a stop sign up and couldn't really move that forward. Following that, we didn't just have the pandemic closure, we ended up with funding issues within our budget. It's been very well advertised. Our budget had a major deficit. We also had just the capacity of people. So much time and effort was being spent on COVID, reopening schools, all of that asking people to take on all of these additional initiatives was going to be difficult. So the first thing I'm going to do is highlight what work we did do. Some of this started before the pandemic closure and some went after that. So you can see some examples on these steps. Early college, we started the early college program in conjunction with St. Charles Community College. As a result of that, we actually have our first graduates this spring who will graduate high school with their associate's degree at the same time as their high school diploma. So we're finally seeing the long-term fruits of that labor. Canvas, you saw that earlier tonight, that actually grew out of a strategic plan initiative. Many of these other topics here, Restorative Academy, that's lots of training across our buildings, security audit, MTSS, that's multi-tiered systems of support, that's an ongoing piece of work as well. Through HR, efforts to recruit diversity, PLC Coaching Academy, so the district had years ago done some initial work around PLCs, and we felt it was time to get back and do some refresher and some additional training there. Summer STEM camps, and really that was part of a larger initiative to expand and enhance our summer offerings, and again, that came through strategic plan work. Blended learning and looking at some future focused approaches to how we can structure some of our classes where kids aren't just in their desk every single day, but there's some virtual tied in with some in-person classes, and really a blended approach there. Next slide, Rich. CPM, which is a math program we're using at the middle and high schools. Phonics, we had identified just prior to the pandemic coming, we had identified some work needing to be done in our reading program, specifically around phonics. And so we had used action teams through the strategic plan to push that forward. District mobile app had been developed. That's now been, 2 or 3 years ago that was rolled out. Tech ambassador cohort, helping our teachers and staff to get more fluent with using technology. And then I referenced earlier, along with our STEM camp, just some updated summer offerings. So this is not an entirely exhaustive list, but it really highlights a lot of the work we were able to get rolling. That was all strategic plan initiated. It came through the action teams. It came through those groups that got that work rolling. Much of the other work had to stop waiting on funding and capacity of people to do it. So at this point, I'm going to kick it over to Dr. Rumpus to talk about where we're headed next.
So board members, as we think about our future work, as Dr. Hoven shared, prior to the initial closure just about 2 years ago, there were many action teams made up of stakeholders from throughout the district that were developing these recommendations. Some of those were ultimately paused until funding could be available based on the pandemic and other issues that were going on. So now that we're nearing the availability of the ESSER funding, there's a number of the initiatives that we believe that we can move forward once that becomes available. Just to remind you, related to the ESSER funding, back in July, we sent out a survey to our stakeholders and received just over 5,000 responses. After that, we spent the next couple of months conducting 7 different focus groups to get additional feedback from our community. A lot of different ideas were generated from the survey and the focus groups. Ultimately, though, they fell under 3 buckets, I would say, larger identified areas, which aligned to the ESSER fund. So one being academic and logistical support that would support learning loss, one being curriculum and instructional updates and support, and then staff salaries continue to come up. So as we look at our strategic plan, there were several action steps that really do align directly to those areas that, because they were previously paused, we could now potentially begin once the funding becomes available. It's important that when I talk about these action steps, no funds have been spent at this point in time. We continue to wait for the appropriation of funds, but want to highlight some of those steps as we begin to move forward. So we have a lot of courses that need to be rewritten to align with new standards. We have a regular curriculum revision process that covers all of our content areas, all grade levels across the district. That process typically revolves on an annual cycle with different content areas coming up each year. We weren't able to do very much work the last couple of years because that work was paused or interrupted. And so we know that moving forward, we have some catch-up work to do. So some of these funds would provide an opportunity. We pay stipends to our staff to work on writing the curriculum, doing the research, also using some of the funds to be able to purchase materials to support the different curriculum. We want to be able to support our teachers to best support our students, and that includes identifying instructional materials to meet student needs in the classroom when we have a student who may be struggling with the grade level curriculum. So looking at specific math and reading interventions that teachers could use within the classroom. We also want to have a robust set of interventions available to us to provide support to students who have the highest level of need and may need additional support in a content area outside of the classroom. So again, looking specifically at the resources as well as the training that teachers may need. We know that our teachers have had a significant amount on their plates the last couple of years. That combined with our staffing shortages, we recognize that it may be using some of these funds either for the stipends for some of our teachers or looking at a vendor who may provide some of the high dose tutoring that we need to address learning loss as we move forward. Another concern that frequently came up both on the survey and in the focus groups was the need for ongoing updates of our student technology, updating both the hardware as well as the software that we're using currently and looking at software we may use in the future. On the next slide, connected to both our curriculum work and the instructional practices, we have several action steps that provide ongoing learning for our teachers. This will address learning loss, it'll support the needs of specific groups of students, it'll also support overall instruction across all content areas and grade levels in the district. These action steps really align to the first 3 strategic plan goals. So 2 of those specific action steps, one would be the Professional Learning Community Coaching Academy that we'll be offering next year that'll benefit all of our students because all of our teachers are involved in that work, as well as additional Canvas training. We highlighted that a little bit earlier this evening, and we really want to make sure that we're best utilizing the tool to connect our families to what's taking place in the classroom. The last action step that we have listed here is exploring a data warehouse for student assessment data. We have a significant amount of data. We have state assessment data, our local benchmarks, formative classroom data, but really we need one place where that could be stored and easily accessed by our administrators and our teachers to analyze the data, to best use it to inform instruction within the classroom. So there were a lot of other action steps that were identified through the ESSER process. There's also other action steps in the strategic plan that will take place. But these 2 slides just share some of the steps that we want to highlight that were previously identified by our strategic planning action teams. And because they were paused, we believe that we can begin to do this work once the ESSER funding becomes available to the district. Now, I think Dr. Hoven or I could answer any questions you might have related to this work.
Board, any questions or comments?
Dr. Rumpus, could you clarify just for the people that are listening in that don't really understand exactly what the ESSER funds are? You said we haven't allocated any of those funds. We spent none of that money yet, but those are one-time funds. So we need to be very strategic in the utilization of those funds so they're not being used for permanent ongoing type of activities. So could you just clarify exactly what that is so everybody understands that?
It is correct. And I should say, when I said we have not received any of the ESSER funds, we have not received any of the ESSER 3 funds. ESSER 1 and 2 were made available. ESSER 3 is currently held up with the Missouri legislature until that is appropriated and released to us, and that will be our largest bucket of funds. Ultimately, the funds that were designated under ESSER 3 are designed to address several key areas, including learning loss that would be related to COVID-19, supporting educational technology, supporting the needs of children who may come from low-income families, children with disabilities, English language learners. It can be used for salaries. That falls under other activities that are necessary to continue the operations and the continuity of services within the district. But again, as you stated, they are one-time funds that are available to us really to support the operation of our organization and our educational programming as we come out of COVID. So really thinking strategically that anything we would utilize these funds for, we do need to be able to continue them or maintain them. When we talk about hiring new staff, that's something that once that funding runs out, are we in a position to sustain those positions? So hiring new staff may not be the best use of funds. But when we do have things like the PLC Coaching Academy that would have a one-time cost, that would support multiple different allowances that are okay through the ESSER funds, that would be a good use of those funds. And we've gotten feedback, like I said, from the survey, from the focus groups, and we'll continue as we receive the funds and go down that path to involve stakeholders and get additional feedback as we make the final plans for how we utilize the funds.
And while we're on the topic of ESSER funds, I'll just point out too, the deadline for our state legislator to appropriate those funds is March 24th. It has made it through the House, waiting on Senate approval and then the governor's signature. So we're getting close. We've been anticipating these funds for quite a long time now, and hopefully we will see here in the next month that they'll get appropriated and we can start making good use of this money.
Ms. Walker?
Yeah, I'm curious if anybody knows the reason why Missouri has not appropriated the funds yet. I had heard that most of the other states had already done so. And is there a chance that they're not going to?
I think trying to identify reasons would just be pure speculation on our part, and so I won't venture any guesses there. Sources that I've heard from have said that we are the only state that has yet to have these funds in the hands of schools. And so we are waiting on that. As far as the question of, is there a chance they don't? Sure. I mean, the issue here is they have to get it through the Senate and across the governor's desk for a signature by March 24th. Is there a chance they don't get that done? I suppose anything until we see that it gets done, I suppose that chance does exist. I've heard optimism from those who keep a close eye on the activities at the state legislature that they are optimistic that it's going to go fine. One of the motivations that might help is that if these funds don't get appropriated, it literally goes back to the federal government to redistribute to other states. So as far as serving any other greater good, if we don't get them appropriated, it just gets absorbed back into other states. And so we all hope very much, and this isn't a Francis Howell issue, this is the schools all around Missouri are waiting on these funds.
Okay. Board, any other? Mr. Zickermeyer?
Yeah, I have a question. As far as the strategic plan goes, I know a lot of the committees were put on pause as a result of COVID. Are there any that have been placed on pause and still are currently on pause and I guess waiting to be revamped or restarted?
Yeah, sure. Basically, all of them were put on pause initially because the work of the committees was to continue to develop new recommendations and additional actions for us to take. And since we already had a backlog of actions already identified and already recommended, it wasn't going to make sense to keep having teams meeting and adding initiatives onto the backlog that wasn't even moving forward. So one of our goals right now in the topics that Dr. Rumpus presented, as he mentioned, it's not just about, it does include public input and the focus groups and the surveys, but it also includes the pre-identified recommendations that we still felt were relevant and still appropriate to move forward. And so really, as we move those forward and get to a point that we believe we can start to take on new work, it will make sense to re-engage those committees to identify really what our next steps are. The other piece that we'll be able to talk about at a future meeting for you is really what does the next iteration of our strategic plan look like. We are getting to the point that re-envisioning the next 5 years is coming up, and that will also be a time not just to re-engage our committees, but to really re-envision overall what the strategic plan looks like and what our overarching goals are going to look like.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else, board? All right, I appreciate the update. Next up, we will have our COVID-19 update.
All right, board members. Our COVID presentation this evening is really only to provide an update on our local and our district data. I want to emphasize that we are not asking the board to take any action this evening related to COVID or any mitigation strategies. Start by showing specifically our St. Charles County data. Our first slide shows that as of yesterday, the county 7-day rolling average was 101 cases. And looking at the number of cases that have been reported the past few days, that is going to continue to drop. This is a significant decrease from the peak where we were at last month of just over 1,000 cases when we shared this at the board meeting. The positivity rate as a percentage of tested individuals is currently at 11.5%. This is specifically within the zip codes that make up our school district. At last month's meeting, you remember I shared that it was at the highest point ever, and that was right around 37%. This slide is the number of confirmed cases per 100,000 residents in the district, which is currently just under 137. Again, I'll point out that last month at the board meeting, we were at about 1,470, and the peak was at 1,700 early last month. So our heat map here just reinforces those last 4 slides, showing you that almost the entire county is back into the light blue range. there's one more shade lighter that we can go. But, I just want to emphasize that, there's still COVID out there, but how much more optimistic we can be at this point based on the data, given where we were just a month ago in St. Charles County. We also see that here specifically within the district. So you'll see that as of 5 p.m. yesterday, we only had 12 active positive cases in the district, of which 3 of those were reported as possibly linked to school exposure. Last month at our meeting, we were at 331. So then when we look at our cumulative cases for the year, that brings our total up to 3,111 cases that have been reported this year. Of that total, 432 of those, or 13.9%, have been reported as possibly connected to school exposure. I highlighted last month the significant increase in the number of cases that we had after we came back from winter break. So 77% of our cases year to date have been since we came back in January. To give you some context, though, of how much our numbers have dropped, of those cases that happened since break, about 2,300 of those were in January, and then only 100 now, 17 days into the month of February. When I shared this slide at last month's meeting, we had 2 buildings that were still over 3%. We had 8 buildings over 2%. And in fact, we only had 3 buildings in the district that had no cases. So yesterday, when we pulled this data at 5 p.m., we had only 8 buildings in the district that had any cases, and not one of those was even near 1/2 of 1%. So again, the decrease that we've seen throughout the county, we're seeing here locally within the district as well. So as I shared at the beginning, we're not asking you to take any action tonight. This was really just to highlight and share the data of where we're at. Really, again, how significantly and how quickly the data has decreased. We as a district continue to be mask optional, and that's at all times except when we are on our buses. You'll remember that that federal mandate is currently in place through March 18th, which would mean that for us, it would end right when we go into spring break. So when we would return from spring break, our students and drivers and other staff on the buses would not have to wear masks. However, if the federal mandate were to change prior to that, we would be prepared to respond accordingly as soon as that happened. We do have the thresholds in place should any building get close to 3% again based on an outbreak in a specific building. We also continue to work with the county that positive individuals are isolated at home for 5 days and they return on day 6 only if their symptoms have improved. So as we look forward, the next step is really now working with our building and our district administrators to review our events between now and the end of the school year to look at what we can be doing, what we're comfortable with as we continue to relax our other mitigation measures, assuming the data stays as positive as it is right now within the district, looking that as we get closer through the spring and toward the end of the year, that more and more of our events feel somewhat closer to normal for what they were several years ago. Also, hoping that we have your support that unless we have a significant increase in cases over the next month, if it's similar to where we're at, that we would just provide this COVID update as a report under information as opposed to providing it as a formal report. However, if the board members have any specific questions or if there is a significant change in the data, we would always be prepared and happy to share that with you and answer any questions that you might have. So that's our report for tonight related to COVID, and be happy to answer any questions you might have related to this.
Board, any questions, comments? Ms. Stiglich?
First of all, I want to say thank you, Dr. Rumpus, Dr. Hoven, and all the administrators in our buildings, our school nurses, our teachers, everybody, for navigating what has been not a very easy 2 months of school and doing it and keeping our kids safe. I know how much work goes into this, and I just want to make sure that you guys really know how much it is appreciated. I fully support just having this as an information only, unless, of course, we see a new variant. Knock on wood, that doesn't happen, or whatever. But Dr. Rumpus, Dr. Hoven, thank you so much for your support while we were working through this. It is very much appreciated. I know our parents thank you, and so do our teachers and our kiddos.
Any other questions or comments, board? Okay. And I thank you as well. I know this hasn't been easy for anyone. Okay, moving on to our consent agenda. Board, I would like a motion to approve the consent agenda items for February 17th, 2022 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Any opposed, raise your right hand and say nay. Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the purchases over 7,500 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, board? Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Switching it up a little bit. All those opposed, please raise your right hand and say nay. Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the purchases over 7,500 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
We talked. Okay, discussion. It's only Worldwide Technologies that we're voting on now, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
I will be abstaining from this vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand and say yay.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And I'll be abstaining again once again. Motion carries. Board, I'd like a motion to approve the January 2022 financial statements as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Supple.
Thank you, Mrs. Lang. There are a couple of significant items that I wanted to be able to discuss with the board this evening. So we did receive a substantial financial institution tax payment this year, a total of $6.5 million. As we have done in all prior years, we allocate that funding by our tax rate. And so $5.5 million of that was allocated to funds 1 and 2 or operating accounts. And then the remainder of that was allocated to the capital fund and to the debt service fund. Mr. Wilson, if you could pull up the FIT tax slide, please. Sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, and you can see here the variability over time. First of all, I would point out that, and the years preceding FY07 were not significantly different. So 10 years of very, very little revenue, and then that large increase in fiscal year 18 and 19, a little bit of a drop off in 20, and then really hit rock bottom last year, and then this year, $6.5 million. Just a reminder that the FIT tax is a tax on banking institutions that are located within the district boundaries. Because it is a tax-driven revenue source, we can't access any information about that. So every year I wait until I have that money distributed to me, and then I know exactly how much I'm going to get. But unlike other portions of our revenue, like the basic financial aid that we receive from the state or the sales tax revenue, I have particular formulas and indicators from DESE or other groups that help to predict and hopefully fairly accurately what those revenue sources would be. I really have no way to predict what the FIT tax revenue will be. So we're glad to have received the funds, and I just wanted to make a specific mention of that. So the other piece that I wanted to mention is the portion that is related to state revenue. So there was a bill passed by the Missouri General Assembly that instituted a change to collection of FIT tax revenue. And along with that was a provision that the state, through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, would budget money to help to true up anything that was lost by districts as a result of uh, the change to the FIT tax revenue collection at the state level. So this year is the first year that those payments were made. And much like the FIT tax revenue that we just discussed, the state revenue also is that there's no backup documentation or calculation that's associated with that. But this year we did receive $2.3 million from the state. That money is recorded as a state revenue source, so it shows up within the object of 5311, which is our basic state aid. So our basic state aid for the remainder of this year is going to appear to be running much ahead of budget, but that's really because that $2.3 million is skewing that. In the financials memo, I have made a correction for that, an adjustment, so that we can compare our revenue this year in relationship to what we've received previously. Again, I just wanted to point out we did get that $2.3 million, and I am making some adjustment within the memo so that people have a way to track it. Our comparisons year over year are already a little bit skewed because last year the state withheld so much money at the beginning of the year and played catch up throughout the year. We have been at full funding for our adequacy target for a couple of months now. And so this year is different anyway, and then the FIT tax recoupment payment that was made just tends to skew that a little bit more. The third piece of good news that I wanted to share tonight is that the district did take advantage of a federal program to provide some reimbursement for our vacation station and preschool programs that were operating while the pandemic was at its height. So we were able to receive $480,000 in Paycheck Protection Program funding. We got that in January, and I do want to give a public thanks to Nicole Colesper for tracking that and alerting us to that so that we could make the appropriate application for that. The final thing I wanted to share with the board tonight is that we do have a plan to issue the remainder of our Proposition S bonds. So we initially issued $100 million of the $244 million that had been approved. Our plan all along was to do a couple of additional issues as those funds were necessary for construction. One of those would have been in calendar year 2022. The reason that I am wanting to move forward now is that the Federal Reserve has announced that they are going to be raising interest rates. That's already beginning to have an impact on the market. But more importantly, taxing jurisdictions across the state have around $1 billion worth of bond issues, that a majority of which will be on the ballot in April. And so once we get past April, there will be quite a bit of available bonds that will be in the market. And to the extent that we can be in the market, A, before we see a lot of rate increases from the Federal Reserve, and B, before we have competition in terms of supply and demand with that $1 billion worth of bonds that will hopefully be approved in April, I think it will help us to achieve an overall lower interest rate. So the plan is to bring a recommendation to the board at the March meeting to issue the remaining $144 million in Proposition S bonds to take advantage of the current low interest rates, both prior to the movement by the Fed and also to have our markets, our bonds in the market ahead of those that will come following the April election. Those are my updates, Mrs. Lang, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Board, any questions or comments?
I would just like to ask Mr. Supple if he could explain again for all of us, why is it that we put money into capital improvements on an annual basis, when
Thank
we
you.
had bond money. I heard that brought up again in patron comments, and I'm wanting you to share that information with all of us again, please.
Thank you. I'd be glad to do that. So well, the Proposition S money is really reserved to the projects that have been identified as Proposition S projects. Now we have a physical plant. We have 23 school buildings, some ancillary buildings, 3 million square feet. We've talked about all this. We have to maintain those facilities irrespective of any work that's being done related to Proposition S. And so we spend money every year to repair sidewalks and windows and roofs and replace boilers. You see a number of the purchases that were approved tonight are related to non-Proposition S capital improvement projects just to keep our buildings operating. In addition to that, our capital fund is where we pay for the leases on our computers and the leases on our buses. And so those are also expenses that we incur that they're considered capital assets. And so those are paid out of the capital fund. So we do have a capital fund tax levy, and we allocate some of our tax levy to the capital fund every year. So when we get a revenue source like the financial institution tax, we distribute that proportionally to our funds as we do our property tax revenue. But it does help to offset the cost of the regular operating work that is done to maintain a physical plant across the district. Those 23 school buildings and all of our ancillary buildings and just the normal work that's required to keep the system operational.
Outstanding. Thank you again for explaining that.
Board, any other questions or comments?
Kevin,
Mr. Lane?
the $480,000 reimbursement we received for vacation station and early childhood, does that offset some of our losses over the last 2 years?
Yes, it will.
Thank you.
If you look at the financial statements this year, this month, it has a very positive impact right now for the current fiscal year. It won't completely eliminate the deficit that those programs incurred. We had ongoing expenses in those programs and no revenue coming in during the period when COVID did not allow us to operate those programs. So that was a pretty substantial hit to those programs. They rely on the tuition revenue primarily to support them. So this is much needed and much appreciated. Does a lot to help right-size the program, but doesn't completely eliminate the deficit.
Thank you.
Anything else, board? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Any opposed, please raise your right hand and say nay.
Aye.
Motion carries. Board, I would like a motion to approve the 2023-2024 school year calendar as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or questions or any input, Ms. Simpkins?
So, Ms. Lang, we did a workshop last month and I provided all of the information regarding the community survey and changes to the drafts, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the board might have at this time.
Anything, board? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 All those opposed, please raise your right hand and say nay. Motion carries. Board, I'd like a motion to uphold the committee's result as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Board, do we have any discussion? A patron had appealed the reconsideration committee's decision on the book Monday's Not Coming. So it's been brought before us for a vote. Any discussion or questions? Nope. All right. All those in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay and raise your right hand. Motion carries. Next up, we will have our academic workshop. Dr. Buckman.
Board, happy Board Appreciation Week. Yet again, you saved the best for last. I'm honored. I know it's been a long meeting, so we will get right to it. If you remember last month, David Brothers joined me and we talked a little bit about the academic health of the district, and David is actually with us again tonight, so thanks for joining us, David. And we'll share a little bit of information and then answer some questions that you might have. Rich, next slide. So as we shared last month, the state did not calculate the APR, but they did release many of the same data points to both districts and the public. And so as you might remember, the state grades us on the 5 areas that you see here on the slide. And we talked about 3 of them last month when we were together. And so tonight we'll focus mostly on academics and then subgroup achievement. And so for those of you who have heard this presentation in the past, you might remember that in a typical school year, we talk about status and growth and progress. And this year we'll really focus on MPI points because that's really what the state has provided us. So just as a quick refresher, MPI is our MAP performance indicator. And those are the points that are issued to us based on how well our students perform on MAP and EOC assessments. And so while the state is interested in looking at, sorry, Rich, you want to head to the next slide? One more. There you go. While the state data is interesting, back one. There we go. While the state data, while we look at it, I want to just give you a couple cautions before we look at it. So we've been told multiple times by DESE that it's not the year to compare data between districts. And the reason for that really is because if you think about it, this is the data from COVID. And every district responded differently to COVID. There was districts that were in person, districts that were virtual, districts that were hybrid, and it wasn't a typical year for any of our students or any of our staff members. And we know that in Howell, we were very clear with our staff that just getting through the year, taking care of students and taking care of each other was their #1 priority. And it was a hard year. There were so many variables that would have impacted not only just our assessment data, but the data of other districts. All of that leads to why it's just not the year to compare. So while we're certainly proud of how our students performed on the assessments, we want to be fair to our staff and also other districts and just provide those reminders and cautions as we begin to look at the MAP and the EOC data. So go ahead, Rich, to the next slide. We'll start with just a single MPI score. So this one shows our overall MAP and EOC performance for all of the areas combined. So if you take the MAP, the science, the social studies, and the ELA data, and you combine it into a single score, this is kind of our summary score. And so you can see we have the highest MPI score in St. Charles County, and we're just a fraction of a point below the highest performing district in St. Louis County. So something to be very proud of. And then on the next slide, you'll see that we will start by looking at the data that the state provides us around MAP and EOC tests. So we'll kick it off with English Language Arts. So this assessment's given to all of our students in grades 3 through 8, and then English 2. So it's typically what our kids take in 10th grade. The chart on the left shows our overall student performance, and then the chart on the right shows the performance of our kids in what the state would call our super subgroup. And so that would be kids who have an IEP or receive free reduced lunch or fall in Black, Hispanic, ELL subgroups. They're kind of all combined into what the state calls our super subgroup. The yellow highlight shows, on those previous slide, the yellow highlight shows how we performed as a district, and then the blue highlight shows how the state performed. And then you can see all of the St. Charles and St. Louis County districts there. And so what I want to point out when you look at these two charts, not only did we significantly outperform the state, but we also outperformed almost every other district. When you look at the MPI scores for all students on the left, and you compare it to the subgroup on the right, what we take some time to look at is just the gap between those scores. And that's something that we monitor, and we'll talk a little bit about it later on tonight in a couple different areas. On the next slide, you'll see lots of different colors. So this slide is still providing that same information around the MPI scores for ELA. While the last slide gave you the overall for each district, this one breaks it down for each of those grade levels that are tested. If you remember last month, I shared a slide with you that highlighted all those grade level celebrations. This is really just a closer look at that data. And so the color comparison just gives you a better visual of the data. So the lower the score, the more red that you'll see, and the higher the score, the more blue that you'll see compared to other districts. Switching gears a little bit, the next slide shows you data around our math assessment. And so this assessment is going to be the math students in grades 3 through 8, and then Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. So again, the left is going to be all of our students, and the right would be what our state calls the super subgroup. The yellow would be our district, and then the blue would be the state. And so you'll see that, again, we outperform the state and most of our peers, only falling to number 2 by a fraction of a point. You'll also see the gap between all of our students and our subgroup is just slightly larger in math than it was in ELA. And then on the next slide, you'll see again just that rainbow chart. And remember, the more room for growth, the more red, and the higher the scores, the more blue. Something to note when you look at this slide is when you look at our 8th grade MAP scores, just want you to keep in mind that all of our students who are enrolled in Algebra 1 as an 8th grader, it's about 35% of our kids, they don't take the 8th grade MAP test, they actually take the Algebra 1 EOC or end of course exam. And so, you know, in theory, a lot of our highest performing students aren't included in our 8th grade data, and not every district handles it that way, and so it certainly impacts our scores there. On the next slide, the third of the 4 areas we'll look at is our science data. And so this would be our 5th grade, 8th grade, and biology students. What's a little interesting here is that our 5th and 8th grade assessments are grade span tests. And so that means that the 5th grade test covers standards from 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and the 8th grade test covered standards from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And so once again, you'll see all of our students on the left and the subgroup on the right. The gap between these groups falls a little bit between math and ELA. It leans a little closer to math. And then you'll see that rainbow chart on the next slide. Again, on the lower the score, the more red, and the higher the score, the more blue. And then the final one we'll share with you tonight is social studies. And so this one's a little unique in that it only includes one assessment. All of the others take a variety of assessments from a variety of grade levels and average them together. And this one, it's just looking at one assessment. This is the government EOC. It was a new assessment this year. It's typically taken in a student's junior year. Once again, on the left, you'll see all students, and on the right, you'll see our subgroup. The gap between all of our students and our super subgroup is actually the smallest of the 4 different areas that we looked at in social studies. While we outperform the state, we certainly would like to see our students perform better compared to our surrounding districts. While we fall in the middle of the charts, you know, when you look at the difference in points between the districts, there's about a 10, 11 point range between us and the other districts above us, with the exception of the top performing district. You might notice at the bottom, Orchard Farm isn't included, and that's because they have such a small number of students who are tested that their MPI actually isn't calculated. So we're excited. We'll talk a little bit about it in next steps, but we have a content leader who is dedicated to social studies, who has a social studies background and has a lot of ideas about what we can do in this area here. So a lot of good stuff to come for social studies. And then finally, you'll see, again, that rainbow chart. There's only one assessment, so only one column, but we wanted to be consistent and show you that visual for those that like the color. And then we'll switch gears a little bit and we'll talk about our internal benchmark data. So before I show you the data, I just want to mention that locally we look at our internal measures of assessment, and this helps us keep our finger on the current reality of our students' academic health throughout the school year, so that it's no surprise when the MAP test or the EOC data comes back. We kind of are able to predict how students will do. And so Francis Hall uses FastBridge as our benchmark assessment tool for our students K-8. And we like this tool because it's nationally normed, so it helps us see how our students are performing in relation to kids, not just in our state or area, but across the country. And it has a strong correlation to how they perform on the state assessments. And so it's given 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. And typically when I talk with you, I'm only able to share our fall data, but because I'm coming in February, tonight we'll have fall and winter data to share with you. And so we use this data. I know everybody always wants to know, what do you do with it? We certainly don't test just to test. So we use this data to help at the district level with some of those curricular decisions. So pacing, priority work, things like that. And then at the building level, it's one of those pieces to the puzzle when we're starting to talk about interventions and meeting individual student needs. And then when we look at the data across the district, when we notice a bright spot in a school or in a specific grade level, we're able to lean into that data and figure out what's going well in that school or in that building or in that grade level, and how can we expand that practice or share what it is that they're doing with folks outside of that building or grade level. So it's one of the pieces to that. So on the next slide, you'll see the ELA benchmark data. So you might remember that previously we used GATES data, and then we transitioned to FastBridge about 3 years ago. So this takes a look at our fall data for 2 different assessments over a 3-year period. So on the left, you'll see our A reading. This measures our overall reading ability of a student. It's a computer adaptive test. So kids read passages, they answer questions, and the computer will adjust the complexity of it. On the right, you'll see the CBMR. That's a fluency test where kids read aloud for about a minute. They're both normed tests, nationally normed tests. Excuse me. The data describes the percentage of kids who fall in a no, a low, a some, or high risk of being below grade level in reading at the end of the school year. And so here's what's interesting to us. When you look at the results, you can see that over the 3-year period, the data's been fairly consistent. And we anticipated that we would see some significant gaps in the data post-COVID. And so while it's only one data point, we really aren't seeing that. It is worth noting that while the high risk number showed a slight increase, you'll also see that the students with no risk showed a slight increase. Most of our students are doing well, with 70–75% of them showing no or low risk of being academically behind grade level at the end of the school year. And then on the next slide, you'll see the winter benchmark data. So this would be the data that was just collected, a few weeks ago. And so one thing to note here is that the target increases for the winter benchmark because it would be assumed that students have more knowledge when taking the winter benchmark than they did the fall benchmark. And so seeing that our students are fairly consistent with their fall performance, what it tells us is that they're growing at an appropriate rate. Our kids are learning. Internally, we look at the growth rate from one benchmark to the next, and then we break that down by the various subgroups that we talked about earlier when we looked at the gap with the super subgroup. Buildings use the information and they break it down all the way down to individual students and look at those growth numbers from fall to winter. So again, on the left is that A reading, which is the overall reading ability, and on the right is that fluency. And then we'll switch gears, same assessments, but now the math version. And so we give math to students in grades 2 through 8. So on the left, you'll see A math, that's the computer adaptive general math knowledge. And then on the right, you'll see the CBM, and that's the timed assessment, application of math concepts and math fluency. And then on the next slide, you'll see that same data, just the winter benchmarks. And so again, just to note, we didn't see the significant gaps post-COVID that we anticipated seeing. The reading and the math data, they're slightly different, but they're really in the ballpark. There's not a significant difference. Nationally, we hear a lot of talk about kids being COVID having a significant impact on math, and this data point, it really doesn't surface in that. So that was interesting for us to see. And then the final area we'll look at tonight is social emotional learning. And so while this isn't a specific area included in APR, we know that the social emotional health of our kids is directly tied to their academic achievement, and it's a strong focus in our strategic plan. And so this is the second year that we administered the SABRE screener. It's part of that FastBridge benchmarking tool. All of our kids K-8 are administered that assessment. Just like math or ELA, it's given 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. It's a series of questions that students respond to independently on the computer. It looks a little different at the kindergarten and first grade level with teachers completing the assessment. They're a little more involved. But it looks at students' academic, social, and emotional health for an overall social emotional data point. And so on the next slide, excuse me, I can't shake my cold. On this slide, you'll see the data for a span of time. And so the results from this assessment, once the data's in the computer, it indicates that a student is either high, some, or low risk of a social emotional concern. And so we know that not all of our kids who are at risk are asking us for help and letting us know that something is wrong. And so this assessment helps to surface someone who may have otherwise, for lack of a better word, fallen through the cracks. The information, once a student completes it, is then shared with the building care team. And then that care team is able, it just kind of flags a student. And then the counselor or a member of the care team is able to dig in and just take another look at a student and figure out if there's something going on that we can help with, or reach out to a family to learn more about. It's just that one data point. So what this slide shows us is that the majority of our students, typically about 85% of our kids, fall in the low risk category. And so for those that fall into the some risk, we're able to look at those subtest results to give us that additional information. This data also gives buildings some information, and they can use those to integrate into counseling, group counseling lessons, or just kind of good tier 1 instruction. So just another piece of data. And then last year, if you remember, we shared a little bit about just kind of an informal internal curriculum audit that we did. And our curriculum team did this because with the reduction of release time, we weren't writing as many new courses as we would in a typical year. And so it gave our team time to comb through over 300 courses K-12 and look at alignment of standards and how old are the resources and how well are we integrating technology and what's the rigor of the course. So David Brothers is our director of curriculum and assessment, and he's with us tonight, and he's going to highlight real quick just a couple of the big ideas from that audit.
One of the reasons that, like Connie mentioned, we wanted to conduct a curriculum audit was over the last 2 years, just minimal curriculum work has been able to happen just because of all things COVID. But then also, in addition, over the last decade or probably even more, we've had a lot of budgetary constraints the district has been facing, and our curriculum cycle has not been able to have been properly maintained. So anecdotally, I think we had some idea this was going on, but here's really what surfaced, some big ideas. 25% of Francis Howell curriculums have not been revised in more than 10 years. Couple that with very few courses being revised in the last 2 years. More and more courses are going to be more than 10 years out of date. To put that in perspective, in an ideal world, every 6 to 8 years a course would be revised. Something else that surfaced was that 63% of our courses do not have a district-provided resource or have one that's more than 10 years old. Sometimes, even if curriculum is written, the actual big expense that goes along with that is providing students and teachers with up-to-date resources. So what happens is, let's say we have an area that doesn't have a resource that's a district-provided resource. Our teachers are amazing at what they do, and they do the best they can to align their lessons and find resources to use. But what that does is it leads to some places that may be very highly aligned to curricular expectations and other areas where they're just less aligned to curriculum expectations. And that may lead to inconsistencies across buildings or even classrooms next door. Here's an example. About 4 years ago, kindergarten through 5th grade science curriculum was rewritten. And however, due to budget constraints, a science textbook was not adopted. We were able to provide teachers with an online resource and dedicated supply money to make sure our elementary students are engaged in hands-on learning in science. In general, though, our elementary teachers are not science experts. So this lack of resource really adds additional stress to our teachers' already overly full plate. The other thing to note is, though, courses written in the last 6 years, for the most part, are very highly aligned and with our most current curricular expectations, maybe outside of that resource need. So those are things like rigor and relevance, alignment to the most current standards, technology integration, ADA compliance, and cultural relevance. So our next step with this is really to develop a 6 to 10 year plan where all of our courses can be touched and keeping a budget amount consistent that we know, assuming no budget increase for the next 6, 10 years, that our teachers or administrators can look to and say, gosh, in 2024, this is the year that this course is going to be touched, and the following year, a dedicated resource will be able to be provided.
And as we wrap up tonight, just want to close with some conversation on next steps. And so Rich, on that next slide, we list out just a few things that tie to the data that we shared tonight. David just mentioned the multi-year plan for curriculum and resource updates that he's working on. We know that, as mentioned earlier with the strategic plan work, that we started rolling out our phonics program in the middle of COVID. And so we need to continue the work to implement that new program. We know that our government scores aren't where we would love to see them. And so we have, as I mentioned, a dedicated social studies content leader who will be able to provide content support and instructional support, exploring the idea of a benchmark assessment in that area, just doing some work with those teachers to see where we can support students. All of our buildings have improvement plans, and many of them are focused on that gap that we talk about between all of our students and our subgroup students, as well as stretching our students who are typically high achieving. We know that we're a district known for the professional learning opportunities that we provide to our staff. And so several of the things that were mentioned in the strategic plan presentation around professional learning communities, all of that is going to have a direct impact on our student achievement data. We spend a lot of time collaborating with other districts, especially our content leaders. They are well connected and networking. And so when we have a district that's outperforming us as a whole, or even just in a little pocket, we are reaching out and learning more about what it is that they're doing that may or may not be different than what we're doing, that's providing them those scores that look a little bit different from ours, and what we can learn about that. And then, as I mentioned last time, typically we have been under MSIP 5 in how we earn our accreditation. And we know that that's over and done with, and the state is now moving to MSIP 6. And so we're still learning about it. The state is still developing it. And as we transition to MSIP 6, that'll certainly impact the decisions that we make and the work that we do. So as we know more, we'll bring that to you guys and share a little more with you. And then on the next slide, you'll see a picture from new educator induction this year at the start of the school year. And so last month, I wrapped up telling you that it takes a village. And I just want to take a moment to reiterate that tonight. Being an educator, regardless of the seat you sit in, is hard work. And being an educator in today's world is really hard work. There are so many external pressures that our educators are facing that were not issues that they had to carry on their shoulders just a few years ago. And our staff continues to show up every single day because they're passionate about our kids. Every month they have an opportunity to visit with a group of folks from a variety of seats within our district. They share what's going well and what we need to do some problem solving around. And a week or so ago, I met with my February group, and they were sharing stories with me of colleagues who come in every day with an energy level that get kids excited to learn no matter how exhausted they are, and colleagues who are pulled right and left to sub, but still find a way to meet the needs of their students without missing a beat, administrators who are giving grace and empathy on a daily basis, teachers who jump in and share ideas with others before they're asked, colleagues who are creating tutorials for Canvas and how-to documents so that their peers can navigate that new tool. Coworkers who are skipping lunch to spend time with a student who's having a hard day, and they could have gone on for hours. I know that all of you know and realize that we work in a district that is full of truly amazing humans, but just wanted to make sure that we take a moment to honor that work and recognize that the job of an educator is not getting any easier by any stretch. And yet our students continue to perform at high levels. And so regardless of the seat in which any individual sits, every employee really did contribute to the celebrations that we saw both between last month and between tonight. So just wanted to take a moment to honor them, since it's easy for David and I to come and share the data, but they're really the ones doing all that hard work. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have for either of us.
Board, any questions or comments?
I have a question. You talked about some of the budget issues with exploring or redeveloping new curriculum. What are the biggest costs associated with that? And if you did touch on that and I didn't hear it, I apologize. But what are the biggest costs associated with redoing curriculum or exploring new curriculum?
Really is the being able to provide district provided resources for our students and our teachers. The actual curriculum writing itself and that process involves anywhere from 3 to 8 to 10 teachers, and providing stipends for them. And that really is a minimal cost. The cost that's expensive is really making sure that our courses can be revised like they should be every 6 to 8 years, and making sure teachers have an up-to-date resource.
What I would mention too, outside of the cost, it's also just the manpower. So even if we had an infinite pot of money, it's finding the people that are able and willing to come together to write the courses, the curriculum, just the time and energy it takes to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, board? Okay, thank you so much. Next up, we have 4 curriculums for our first reading. We brought back to us next month. And next up, we have superintendent comments.
Thank you, Ms. Lang. I'll keep it brief tonight. I just really want to thank everybody for their flexibility in moving to a virtual format. Weather's been a little crazy for us. You know, we already had our one big storm, and this one hit us right in the middle of the day, which is always a challenge. And so I appreciate everybody's ability on 24 hours notice to make the change and handle things this way. So that's really all I've got, and everyone be safe when you get back out on the roads.
Great, thank you. Board, do you have any comments or requests? Nope, okay. Then board, I would like a motion to return back to closed session, please.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please raise your right hand and say nay. Motion carries. Thank you all.